Chapter 465. But I will get to the bottom of this. Whoever is responsible for such expensive joke will answer to me, Gustav responded with a cold tone before he resumed walking. Gustav met up with E.E., who was waiting not too far away from the location of the place where they were interrogated. It should only take a few minutes, Gustav said to him, and E nodded in response. Why is he? What are you? Vera was a bit confused as she stared at both of them while voicing out. You can go, Vera. They'll handle things from here, Gustav instructed. I'm all right. Vera complied and started walking away while Gustav and E moved to the side to wait behind a tree. Both of them waited for several minutes before a male cadet, wearing glasses with a buzz cut, walked out of the facility ahead. Gustav and E remained in their positions and watched him walk across the path. After he was hundreds of feet away from the tree, they started following him from behind. Gustav and E tailed the youngster until they arrived at a particular part of the camp that was slightly secluded. Gremlin, how about we have a little chat? Gustav voiced out from behind, causing the youngster to halt his steps. The moment he heard Gustav's voice, he turned around with a wary expression written on his face. Before he could even say a word, Gustav had already dashed forward as E conjured a vortex behind Gremlin. THRKKK. Swoosh. Gustav's body traveled so fast, arriving before Gremlin in almost an instant as he reached out his hand and grabbed Gremlin by the throat before pulling him into the vortex along with himself. Swoof. The vortex closed up the instant E also jumped inside. They appeared at a high mountain top that was literally poking the clouds. Gustav held Gremlin by the neck, while standing on the ledge with his arm outstretched forward. Gremlin was only hanging from the top with Gustav's grip on his neck. Beneath him, there was no solid ground beside the one that was thousands of feet down. All he could see was the fog and the ledge, which he couldn't reach because of Gustav's tight grip on his neck. Let go! Gremlin tried clawing and kicking as he yelled for Gustav to let go of him, but no matter what he did, it was to no avail. This brought him to the realization that he really couldn't do anything against Gustav's strength. E stood behind Gustav and looked around the massive mountain range. This is quite this scary place. If you didn't bring me here, I probably wouldn't have known that such a place existed, E voiced out. Yeah, it's a good place to hide a corpse. Good thing only the senior years are permitted to come here, and they don't use this place often, Gustav said with a devilish smirk. The Embio camp was like a city, so there were still many places that weren't in use for the time being, and this place happened to fall into that category. It was off-limits for the first years as well, but since Gustav was an officer, he could bring anyone he wanted here using his official privilege. Now don't you have something to tell me, Gremlin? Gustav proceeded to ask while staring into Gremlin's eyes. Tell you? What are you talking about? Gremlin asked while stuttering slightly. Don't play dumb with me. You know very well what I'm talking about, Gustav responded with a threatening tone. Gustav was still disappointed at himself for not noticing that someone was spying on him and Vera. Even though he had perception and could sense his surroundings, he was distracted by what they had witnessed that he didn't really pay attention to this guy who happened to have been watching from another spot. Are you talking about the display? I only visualize what I witness, Gremlin voiced out in response. Since you were there, you clearly know that I'm innocent. Who put you up to this? Why did you do it? Gustav asked while stretching his hand even further outwards. Size manipulation has been activated. Gustav's right arm lengthened further by 3 feet. Whoosh! The wind blowing across the place further induced Gremlin's fear as his glasses were nearly knocked off his face. You dare not drop me. You will lose your place as a cadet in the MBO. Haha, you will lose everything, you can't do anything to me. Gremlin screamed out with a shaky voice induced with a little aggressiveness. It was as if he was trying to mask his fear. Inwardly, he hoped Gustav wasn't as crazy as the rumors said. Oh, really? Maybe I have to remind you that as it stands, I already have a chance of losing everything. Wouldn't it be better to just seal my fate? Gustav smirked as he slowly loosened his grip from Gremlin's neck. Don't let go. Don't let go. Gremlin screamed out in fear as he held onto Gustav's arm to prevent himself from falling. Even if I am cast out, at the very least I get to end you. Even the MBO can't bring a dead person back to life. Also, you aren't even worth the trouble even if they could, Gustav added with a small chuckle. At this point, Gremlin's face had paled severely and kept losing color by the second as he stared at Gustav's demonic expression. He's crazy. He's very crazy. Gremlin had never felt so scared of his peer before. Thinking about Gustav's words, everything made sense, and he didn't seem like he was bluffing. Behind E stood in place, watching the scene. He was just there as support, so he didn't butt in. Phew. Gus sure is scary. I really pity his future enemies, E said internally. Okay, I'll talk. I'll talk. Gremlin finally decided to compromise after a few more moments. Gustav's lengthened arms started returning back to normal size as he pulled Gremlin towards his direction. He placed Gremlin on the side of the ledge and stared at him. I'm listening, Gustav said with a reminding tone. How can you guarantee my safety if I tell you the truth? I don't want to mess with such people, Gremlin said with a scared tone. What are you talking about? Gustav asked with a tone of curiosity. I'm talking about those who put me up to this. I can't reveal their doings without consequences. Can you guarantee my protection? Gremlin voiced out once again. Your protection is already secured within the MBO. Why would you be scared of this group? E asked from behind. Oh yeah, haha, my protection is so secure that you two can bring me out here in the middle of nowhere and end my life. Although you wouldn't go scot-free with such act, that doesn't mean my protection is secure, Gremlin voiced out with a tone of sarcasm. Well, that makes sense, E responded with a thoughtful gaze, and Gustav agreed with that statement. What if they were dealing with people who didn't really care about the consequences of their actions like him? Although it was almost impossible since everyone was here with the purpose of becoming an MBO officer. No one would want to throw that opportunity away, logically speaking, but Gustav still felt something was amiss in this whole situation. Tell me what we're dealing with first, Gustav proposed. Can you or can you not guarantee my safety? Gremlin asked once again. Can't. Unless I know what I'm dealing with, Gustav responded. Well, then my lips remain sealed, Gremlin said while proceeding to sit on the ground. You're just gonna have to choose which end you prefer. I throw you off the cliff if these people come after you while being under my protection, Gustav threatened once again. Gremlin's shoulders creased up as he heard that. All right, you win, he voiced out but remained in his seating position. So, like I mentioned, there's this group of cadets who approached me 1 week back with a proposal. That proposal involved framing you. Gremlin began to narrate. They forced me and told me that if I didn't comply, they'd erase me from existence, and showed proof that they had a way of getting rid of cadets without having to face any consequence. Gremlin had a look of fear on his face as he reached this point. It was quite spooky, and believe me, they weren't bluffing, they really do have their ways. He added, Who are these people? Gustav asked. They blindfolded me, so I couldn't see their faces. When I was being shown proof, they made sure to hide their looks as well. I don't know how they coordinated such an operation without any of the instructors noticing anything, even though the camp is supposed to be well supervised. This made Gremlin even more scared as he thought about this. His ability to display visuals of what he had witnessed couldn't help him at this point, because not only did the group manage to hide their identity, they also took him to somewhere where he couldn't visualize anything. All this was planned. The sex and you meeting in that position with your girlfriend, Gremlin continued narrating. She's not his girlfriend, E chipped in from behind. All right, Gremlin responded and continued after a brief moment of stopping. They also asked me to broadcast it that way all across camp, he added. I see. Now I want you to broadcast the rest, which involved I and Vera leaving the place. I want you to show everyone the truth. Those who were involved in the act should also be revealed, as well as the rest of the visuals, Gustav instructed. I can't do that, Gremlin replied. Why? Gustav raised one eyebrow up as he asked. Because I didn't see the real people involved in the scandalous act. I was only allowed to see you and Vera, Gremlin explained. They really took precautions. This means you can only show me and Vera, but the main culprits will not be revealed, Gustav muttered, and Gremlin nodded in response. I want to know who these people are. And you will help me expose them, Gustav said. Will I be protected? Gremlin asked. If you stay around me all through the coming days, you'll be safe. If they had enough strength to deal with me straightforwardly, they wouldn't try to use such tactics, Gustav stated. Now display the rest of the footage about I and Vera, Gustav instructed. Gremlin nodded and proceeded to close his eyes before joining his palms together. Hours later, Gustav was back in his room thinking about what had happened today. It was currently nightfall, and everyone in camp no longer suspected Gustav and Vera of doing anything inappropriate. The question now was who were the true culprits and why was Gustav framed in the first place? A lot of cadets could guess that it was probably one of those who were jealous and disliked Gustav because of his strength. They felt since this was the MBO, it would only be a matter of time before the main culprits were caught. What they didn't know was even the instructors had no idea who was truly responsible because they couldn't find the footage for that particular area. Gustav was later brought to speed that the footage had been somehow deleted, leaving the true culprits to wander free across the camp without punishment. Gustav was in his room thinking about how the whole issue was complicated. He wanted to meet one of the instructors to talk about the situation with Gremlin and the group, but he was having second thoughts. There's no way a bunch of cadets would be able to pull all these off without an inside backing. Gustav thought. There must be an officer somewhere helping them from behind the scenes. Footage disappearing and them claiming they can do things without suffering consequences. Definitely they have some kind of inside backing. It won't be wise to meet up with an instructor. I can't trust any of them. Chapter 466. They definitely have inside backing. It won't be wise to meet up with an instructor. I can't trust any of them, Gustav said internally as he scanned for the images of instructors internally. He happened to picture Officer Mag in his mind for a few seconds and was already having second thoughts. This was due to the fact that compared to other instructors, Officer Mag seemed detached and was more likely to remain by herself, not engaging in friendly fellowship like other instructors. After a few more seconds of thinking, Gustav decided to brush her off as he recalled another person. There's her too. Commander Cilia. Gustav remembered the main commanding officer in camp who addressed them on their second day of arrival. Gustav recalled that she originally reported to Commander Cheyenne, which means she was put in her current position by the great commanders. Thinking more about it, Gustav figured there was no way she'd be involved in such a scheme like that since it would mean the great commanders didn't have good judgment in selecting the head of this place. The only problem now was her appearance was quite scarce. Since the first day, Gustav and the others had only seen her once. It seemed like she was always leaving and coming back to camp due to her position, which made her quite busy. Gustav decided she was the only one he could go meet with the situation, so he decided he was going to head to her office the next day. The night went by in a flash, and the next day arrived. Morning routine with the others was quite disturbing for Gustav because he had to tolerate Gremlin following him about. Gremlin just couldn't stop talking about so many things, his fears mostly, and how he thought every random person close to them performing the morning routine as well seemed suspicious. Gustav couldn't rely on Gremlin's instincts at this point because his fear was controlling his judgment. Good thing Gustav didn't expect anything from him in the first place besides proving that he and Vera didn't commit such acts in the open. After the morning routine ended, Gustav couldn't observe Indrik as usual because he had to go to visit Commander Cilia's office. He checked for the location on his pass and started heading there. He left Gremlin in EE and Eldris' care. Both of them were more than enough to handle any bullshit that those unknown group of students could dish out, so he wasn't worried. Swoosh. Gustav dashed across the camp, heading towards the hall they arrived in on their first day here. This hall, which was the arrival and exit point from the MBO camp, was actually where the commander's office was located. Thinking about it, Gustav understood that the hall was constructed at this location just in case there were intruders. It would be taken care of instantly. Since she was the commander, he had no doubt that she was the strongest existence in camp. Gustav arrived at the vast wasteland that extended upwards and charged through it, reaching the top in a few seconds. He stopped when he noticed the massive white structure in the distance. It was built to look similar to an old cathedral with tower-like roofing and a pointy cross-like tip. However, it was at least 50 times bigger in size as it covered a large portion of this area. Gustav arrived at the entrance and got beeped. In an instant, he brought out his pass. Arriving in, several other cadets could also be seen moving across the place, heading for and also coming out of the three massive mirrors standing in the middle of the hall. These three mirrors displayed three different locations of the outside world. So it was obvious that those going in were heading for missions while those coming out of any of them were back for missions. These were senior cadets. An instructor who was heading out of the hall noticed Gustav. "Officer Gustav, what are you doing here?" he asked with a slightly surprised look. "What? Am I not allowed to be here?" Gustav asked with a slightly irritated expression. "Oh no, that's not what I meant. Your pass grants you the permission here, so you're definitely allowed here, but I hope you know that beyond sightseeing you are not allowed to do anything else," the instructor said with a soft tone. "There's no need to explain anything. I have my reasons for coming here anyways." "Thank you," Gustav responded before proceeding to move along. The instructor stared at Gustav's back as he walked away with a slightly disturbed expression before he continued on his way. Gustav moved towards the southwest area, where there was a corridor that led towards a small stairway. Following this, Gustav arrived at the top of the stairway, where a door was positioned. According to his pass, this was the office of Commander Cilia. Gustav was about to knock on it when it opened up. Officer Crimson. A feminine voice rang out as Gustav stopped his hand in front of the slim lady who spoke. She was dressed in an orange uniform similar to that of Gradier Zenatus and had a small, oval-shaped face with brown hair packed towards the back with a ponytail. "Commander Cilia," Gustav voiced out as his hand descended. "I'm here to see you," he added. Commander Cilia had a slightly confused expression as she heard that before responding. "I still have a few minutes to spare. Let's go in," she said before turning around. Gustav followed her in. Moments later, Gustav was narrating what had gone down recently within Commander Cilia's office. In a minute, he had given a quick breakdown of the whole situation. "Such a thing went down and I wasn't informed?" Commander Cilia was surprised by the revelation. "I haven't met anyone about the group. I don't trust any instructor," Gustav explained. "Oh, I see. Why?" she asked. "Such a group can't delete a footage without the help of someone on the inside. They are being assisted by an officer," Gustav voiced out his speculation. That makes sense. Commander Cilia already felt this was Gustav's reason, but she wanted to make confirmation. She proceeded to touch the side of her forehead while closing her eyes. "Mag, I need you in my office ASAP," she voiced out. Mag? The image of a short female instructor phased into his mind as he heard Commander Cilia call out this name. "I need to uncover these bastards before they cause any real damage. They failed this time because I was the one target. If it was a weaker and more gullible cadet, they'd probably have their way with the backing they have. That would mean that you, Commander Cilia, are not capable enough to protect the cadets here," Gustav stated. "Relax, Gustav," she said with a smile. "Everything will be taken care of," she added just before a weird sound was heard. Zch. The door opened up, and Instructor Mag walked in. Her short frame looked the opposite of menacing, but her glare was something else. "Did you just say Big Sis was incapable?" she voiced out as she moved towards Gustav. "If she isn't able to protect the cadets even from themselves, then yes." "Wait, did you just say Big Sis?" Gustav voiced out the last part with a look of surprise. He stared at both of them repeatedly, trying to make comparisons. "Oh, I see it now," Gustav said internally as he noticed their similar head shape and eye structure. These two were the type of siblings that you wouldn't know were related to each other unless you looked hard enough. "She's more capable than anyone in this place," Officer Mag said with a cold glare. "I will only believe that after I see the group exposed," Gustav responded with an unbothered expression. "It's all right, you two." Commander Cilia stopped them before they could go any further with their words. "Mag, I have an important business to attend to at the moment, so I won't be able to deal with the current issue at hand, and this is why I have called you here," she added before calling out to Officer Mag. "Come over." Officer Mag did as instructed and walked over. Commander Cilia placed her index finger on Officer Mag's forehead. "Zuin." The instant she withdrew her hand, Officer Mag had been brought up to speed about the whole situation. "Magam, entrusting this assignment to you, since I'll be away. I want you both to work together to expose the cadets and officer behind them," Commander Cilia said before standing to her feet. "I'm 5 minutes late already. I have to go," she said while walking towards the door. "You both can use this office as a secure meeting place. They'll ask the secretary to let you both have access at any time, she added before leaving. Gustav and Officer Mag were left together inside the office. Humph. Let's go meet this gremlin first. I have some questions for him, Officer Mag decided before pulling Gustav along with her. The moment they arrived outside the hall, she grabbed hold of Gustav, and the gravitational force around them suddenly turned weird. Pfui. Officer Mag shot into the air with Gustav in her grasp, traveling across the camp with speed. So she could fly. Gustav was quite surprised at this revelation. Officer Mag's bloodline gave her the ability to manipulate gravitational force, and she had trained it to the point that she could use it to fly. They arrived at the area that led to the special class residence, and she dropped there with Gustav. They'll wait here. Go fetch him, she said while finding somewhere to sit. Gustav dashed towards his residence building and arrived there in a few seconds. As he headed up, he happened to meet Eldris in the corridor heading towards the teleportation elevator with a wary expression. What's wrong? The moment Gustav laid his eyes on him, he figured that something was out of place. Gremlin has gone missing, Eldris answered instantly. What? How? Gustav voiced out with an expression of disbelief. He left. On his own, Eldris responded as they stood in front of the circular blue light. He said he wanted to see the scenery of the corridor area, and I told him not to leave till I found Timmy to stay with him because I was busy with something inside. It was only a span of 10 minutes when I stopped sensing their presence. I came out here, they were both gone. I asked them not to leave the building, Eldris explained. If Timmy was with him, then we can assume that a special class is a part of that group, and they must have been waiting for the opportunity to see Gremlin with a weaker special class cadet. Gustav voiced out. They didn't expect that a special class cadet would be a part of the unknown group. At this moment, EE happened to be coming from somewhere. He went out for a brief period earlier, which was why he wasn't in the vicinity when it happened. Eldris explained the situation to him as well. I can find him, but I need you to be ready to transport us there the instant I do, Gustav said as he activated God Eyes. His eyes glowed scarlet and green with a hint of gold before he closed them. Life signs tracking activated. Gremlin's life sign appeared in Gustav's mind as his dark visual changed. He found himself in a kind of canyon, staring at a group of people with weird dark marks that surrounded him. His vision would occasionally tilt from side to side as it seemed that Gremlin was being beaten up. As his vision focused on the ground, Gustav could see blood, and he quickly used that opportunity to look around. Let's go, I found the place, Gustav shouted out as he deactivated life signs tracking. Chapter 467. This area was in between two tall mountains' walls, leaving a long dark path at the bottom with flowing water. At the moment, they were on the left side beside the flowing water. This area was pretty dark. Let's go. I found the place, Gustav shouted out as he deactivated life signs tracking. This place on the map, Gustav pointed at another place in the camp that was restricted to first years. The Devil Canyon? EE instantly recognized it and clasped both hands together before separating them. Thrick. A vortex was instantly formed in front of them, and they all jumped in. In a particular part of the camp where the clouds were always dark, and clouds hung over two massive greenish-looking mountains, there was a pathway of murky green stream flowing in between both mountains that extended very far due to the size of both mountains. Lightning bolts occasionally appeared in the sky, and 1 in every 10 bolts would land in between both mountains, electrocuting the stream. The senior cadets knew very well why this place was called the Devil Canyon. They would come training in this place, and there was a chance that they'd get struck by lightning if they could not react in time. Aside from that, occasional weird weather occurrence where a crazy tornado could just appear out of nowhere and sweep everything in the vicinity away. This was yet another place within the camp that was restricted to the first-year cadets. Originally, places that were restricted to first-year cadets would be barricaded with invisible fences that would only stop them from going in, but would allow senior cadets so long as they had their passes. Gustav had brought EE to almost everywhere restricted because, with his authority, he could bring anyone with him. EE would not have been able to open a vortex to this location and appear there with Eldris if not for Gustav's presence in their midst. At the left side of the canyon towards the middle, a group of 4 masked cadets surrounded a cadet, putting on glasses and having a buzz cut. Bang, bang, bang. They occasionally landed hits on him, causing the glasses to fall off his face while he bled. Blood oozed down his nose and face as he fell face flat after receiving some brutal hits. Two of the cadets would move towards him and pick him up again to receive another round of beating. "Did you think you could go scot-free with the stunt you pulled?" One of them shouted out before shooting out a whitish beam from his hand. Bam! Gremlin's chest caved in as he was sent blasting backward after the beam made contact with his chest. Bang! He slammed into the side of the mountain, causing a small vibration to occur. Two of the masked cadets moved towards him again to pick him up and brought him back to his initial position, ignoring the blood oozing from his mouth and his exposed chest. "TWS," as Gremlin coughed out blood, he voiced out. "You thought we couldn't do anything to you so long as you were with Gustav Crimson, right?" The other one on the left voiced out as she walked forward. From her stature and voice, it was obvious that it was a female. "We'll tell you now that we have someone better than Gustav Crimson on our side, so you were never safe from the start," she voiced out as a weird red circle appeared around her right arm. "Such foolish action will lead to your demise," she voiced out as more red circles began to appear behind her. Twy, twy, twy. As the circles fired up, ready to shoot, the entire vicinity began to vibrate due to the force. "I guess this is the end," Gremlin said internally as he accepted his fate and prepared to be skewered. "You will die here today for going against us, and even Gustav cannot save you." Just as she shouted out, ready to fire, a purplish vortex appeared from above. "Are you sure about that?" A familiar masculine voice filled with such power and confidence was heard from within the vortex. Even before the owner of the voice appeared, all four masked cadets already knew who it was. Gustav Crimson. They all voiced out in shocked tones just as Gustav and along with Eldris, landed on the ground behind them. Thumb. The female cadet who was about to fire earlier shot out the energy by mistake due to shock after seeing Gustav. Several red beams traveled forward with intensity towards Gremlin, who was still in a kneeling position. Combination has been activated. Sprint plus dash, swoosh. Before anyone could even react, Gustav had already swooped forward at a speed that made everyone around him look like they weren't moving. The beams that were traveling at very high speed were now similar to kids running from Gustav's point of view. Gustav arrived in front of Gremlin before the beams could, but there wasn't enough time to get him out of the way, so he stretched out his palm. Bang! A loud sound of collision rang out as the beams collided with Gustav's palm, causing the ground to crack apart from the impact. Gasp! Although it was impossible to see their faces through the mask, it was obvious that the four cadets had their mouths open after witnessing what had just happened. Gustav was standing in place with his hands stretched out, and parts of his uniform had holes on them due to some of the beams slamming into his body. However, even with all this, there was not a single scratch to be found on his body. He didn't move an inch backward, neither was there any blood. He just stood there like a solid rock. Even the mountain on the side would take damage at the point of such powerful impact. Gustav. Gremlin had teary eyes as he noticed Gustav standing in front of him. "Are you okay?" Gustav said as he slowly lowered his arm. Smoke was still erupting from his palm and other affected body parts, but he remained unscathed. "I'm fine," Gremlin said before coughing out more blood. Gustav turned around and picked him up by the collar with one hand before flinging him like a weightless sack towards Eldris, and he caught him and dropped him in their midst. "Keep him safe, I don't want to be disturbed," Gustav said to both of them as he ripped his uniform apart, displaying his well-chiseled and moderately ripped upper half. "It's been some time since I fought like this. You lots have truly angered me," Gustav voiced out, causing the four cadets to stare at him with visible fear in their eyes. Chapter 468. It's been some time since I fought like this. "You lots have truly angered me," Gustav voiced out, causing the four cadets to stare at him with a visible look of fear in their eyes. Fomsens. In one movement, he arrived in front of the masked female cadet that had just shot out the beams with his hand outstretched. Grab. His palm grabbed hold of her neck in the next instant, and before anyone could react, he dashed towards the mountain wall on the side with full force while pushing her forward. Bang! A loud tremor rang out as she collided head-on into the mountainside with a strong force, creating a massive body-sized hole within. Kryyhhh. Cracks started to spread from the point of impact to other parts of the mountain area. Gustav pulled her body out of the hole. He smashed it on another part of the mountainside, causing a similar effect once again before pulling her out once more. The mechanical mask on her face had already been cracked in half, and blood could be seen dripping down her neck as Gustav held her up. He stared at her face and tried recalling if she looked familiar in any way. One thing he could tell was the fact that she was a normal cadet. The other masked cadets in the vicinity started panicking and calling out to a particular group member. "Hamlet, get us out of here." The other male beating gremlin up seriously earlier voiced out to the tallest one in their group. A blue glow started gathering around them as the tallest one in their group, called Hamlet, raised his hands up. Gustav noticed this and quickly threw the girl in his hand away before dashing forward again with speed. Even with Gustav's quickness, the bodies of the remaining three were already fading away before his arrival. Atomic manipulation has been activated. A long 3 feet milky-colored blade appeared in Gustav's hand, which he threw forward towards Hamlet. The speed coupled with the power of this throw caused the blade to travel forward like lightning. Screeve! It passed through Hamlet's left shoulder like a streak, and what came next was a loud scream. Kyrar! My arm! Hamlet's left arm flew several hundred feet in the air, spiraling repeatedly before landing after Gustav's atomic blade cut through his shoulder. Plop! As it fell to the ground, so did Hamlet, with blood oozing out of where his left hand was formerly located. The three of them bodies had returned to a solid state after Hamlet sustained such damage. He kept screaming as he seemed to be in excruciating pain while the other two decided to turn heels and run. Nobody leaves. Gustav didn't even have a single shred of remorse on his face after slicing someone's arm off. Instead, he was more concerned with making sure all four of them suffered. Although both of them ran in two separate directions, Gustav went after the one he reckoned to be the gang leader first. Swoosh! He arrived in front of him in a matter of seconds. The leader of the masked cadets seemed to have expected this and had a circular-shaped device in his hand prepared already. Beep, beep, beep. It happened to be a set bomb, and he had already activated it. It will go off in less than 10 seconds, so you had better stay away if you don't want to be blasted to bits, he voiced out. Are you really going to kill yourself just for this? Gustav asked with a scoff. It's better than what awaits me, the leader of the masked cadets voiced out before putting the device in his uniform through the small opening at the top area. Gustav dashed forward at this point and thrust his palm forward. Bang! His palm directly slammed onto the part where the bomb was sending the cadet flying backward, but Gustav also grabbed hold of the device through the cloth a moment after he struck it with his palm. Rip! Phew-yi! As the cadet was sent flying, Gustav had managed to rip the bomb device out of his uniform and turn around before throwing it upwards with force. Thwii! It was already in the last seconds, but Gustav's throw allowed it to ascend over 300 feet in the air before a loud blast reverberated across the place. Boo-hoo! Even though it was quite high in the sky, they still felt the pressure below as heavy winds blew everyone's hair backward, making their uniforms flap repeatedly. Gustav dashed forward and grabbed hold of the cadet before lifting him and pulling him along. The other cadet who had gone in the opposite direction had paused for an instant after witnessing the massive explosion. Currently, he was out of the canyon and heading down the mountain on the left. Just as he wanted to keep running again, he spotted a body flying in his direction. Bang! The collision knocked him back by over 50 feet. As soon as he spotted Gustav, he headed for him with intensity. The cadet quickly spat out a yellowish shard towards Gustav. As the yellowish shard arrived in front of Gustav, he moved to the side to dodge. Still, it suddenly expanded, becoming like the size of a building in nearly an instant. Bang! It fell on Gustav with its massive weight, causing a cloud of dust to spread across the place. The cadet who had shot out the shard sighed in relief as he turned around to keep running again. He felt that even if the attack couldn't handle Gustav, it would slow him down a little. However, to his surprise, when he turned to look back, he saw the same massive building-like structure flying towards his direction from behind. Gustav had picked it up and thrown it forward. What? No way. It weighs at least 60,000 pounds. He shouldn't be able to throw it so casually, Fwye. Bang! As it landed, the cadet's screams couldn't be heard as his entire body was crushed under the weight of the massive building like yellow shard. Chapter 469. Gustav turned to the side after noticing that the leader of the masked cadet he threw forward earlier was once again making a run for it. Swoosh! Gustav traveled towards him with speed and dodged several flying darts thrown towards him by the leader. Boom! 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 These darts exploded after reaching a particular distance. However, Gustav was still able to go through them without suffering a single injury. He arrived before the leader with his right arm arched backward, and he threw a jab straight at his face. Bang! Teeth and blood flew out of his mouth as he was sent tumbling back. Gustav dashed forward and swung his leg towards his chest once again. Bang! Bone-cracking sounds rang out this time as the cadet's chest caved in. He felt his ribs and sternum fracturing as his body catapulted through the air before he slammed into the large, yellow-colored, building-sized shard. His helmet had also cracked open at this point, and his face was smeared with blood as his body sunk in the massive shard. A few seconds later, the shard popped and turned into yellow dust that floated across the place. Both cadets had passed out at this point in time. The body of the one crushed underneath earlier was in a weird position that depicted a lot of his bones were already broken. Gustav was about to head towards them when a loud sound was heard in the sky. A small object could be seen cutting through the sky with speed and descending towards Gustav's position. Swai! Bam! So this is where you were at? As the dust cleared, Officer Mag could be seen standing in front of Gustav. It turned out she was the one who was flying through the sky earlier. You okay? She asked Gustav. You should be more worried about them, Gustav said while pointing at the front. She turned around and saw the state of both cadets with their mechanical black masks broken and blood-smeared faces. You sure did a lot of damage, she voiced out. These cadets took Gremlin. They almost killed him. He would have been past tense had I not arrived here as soon as possible, Gustav explained. Officer Mag had a look of understanding. They're first years, so they're not even supposed to be able to access this place. This area is quite far from the residence and really secluded. No officer would be able to notice easily that anything was happening here. She analyzed the whole situation. To her, it seemed like this had been planned perfectly and was almost successful due to whoever was helping this group behind the scenes. I was drawn here by the explosion. Whenever there is a ripple in the gravitational field, as long as it's powerful enough, they'll sense it. The sound of the explosion was not loud enough, Officer Mag said while walking forward. She took the mechanical masks off their faces, completely revealing the looks of two cadets. By the way, how did you even find them so fast? Officer Mag asked. E brought us here with his vortex, Gustav answered. I mean, how did you know that they were in this location in particular? Officer Mag asked with a dumbfounded expression. Just a little thinking and it's easy to figure out. I have been investigating this situation for longer, and also checked out these spots beforehand. Remember, I'm an officer, so I'm not restricted to places like this. Anyone with a brain would be able to figure out that they were here, Gustav explained while shrugging his shoulders. So you saying I ain't intelligent, huh? Officer Mag squinted her eyes as she voiced out while turning around to stare at Gustav. Your words, not mine. Gustav played it off with this. Officer Mag was about to say something else when they noticed E and Eldris coming from up ahead. E was carrying Gremlin on his shoulder while Eldris was pulling the female cadet and Hamlet along with him. Hamlet had already passed out from losing too much blood, and blood was still oozing out from his left empty shoulder area. They piled up the four cadets in a straight lineup after removing the masks from the faces of the rest. Rena Shelby, Kurt Bills, Hamlet Kong, Jerry Richards. Officer Mag had already checked the database for the identity of these four. Just as expected, they were all normal cadets. She proceeded to feed them recovery pills so she could question them. We need to know everything about their group. Although I doubt they'll tell us, so using the brain tweak device would be best, but we can't move them to any of the labs in this condition, Officer Mag stated as she waited for their injuries to stabilize a bit. High-grade recovery pills could fix injuries in a matter of seconds, but there were grievous injuries that would take a lot of time to fully heal. Some injuries won't heal until certain medical procedures are put in place, and this mostly depends on the strength of the person who received the damage. If they were stronger, it was possible to have the injuries fixed faster. Whenever Gustav battled, he always put his opponents in such a state that their bodies could not be fully healed even after using high-grade recovery pills. They had to wait for a bit before anyone would regain consciousness. Hamlet was in a bad state due to his left arm that was chopped off entirely. "You went all out on them," Eldris chipped in. "No, I didn't. They would be dead if I did," Gustav responded. And Eldris knew we were not bragging in any way because it was true with the strength Gustav had displayed. After a few more minutes, one of them finally woke, and it was the leader of their group, Kurt Bills. The instant he noticed Officer Mag in front of him, his face paled. "Now, you're going to tell me everything about your little group? Who are your other subordinates, and who's the officer backing you guys?" Officer Mag went straight to point. Chapter 470. Cough cough asterisk. "What's the point of asking such questions when you know I won't say a thing?" Kurt responded with a weak look. "Why did you fools try to frame me?" Gustav asked. "Haha, isn't that obvious? We want to bring you down so you lose your officer title. Did you forget that you have so many enemies on camp?" Kurt laughed weakly as he stated. "I pretty much figured this was the case. But I can tell there's a motive behind this little scheme of yours, and I'm pretty sure you didn't plan it. Neither are you the leader," Gustav said while squatting in front of him. "I truly am not the leader. Our leader is more powerful than you are, Gustav Crimson, and he will defeat you one day," Kurt voiced out. "I don't care about someone who can't come out and face me head on. What is the motive behind this bullshit, and who are your other subordinates?" Gustav asked with a cold look as his eyes glowed a crimson color and fangs grew out of his mouth. "Haha, you think I'm scared? It's already the end of the road for us. You can't do nothing," Kurt voiced out as he started coughing out black blood. "What's wrong with him? There shouldn't be any more bleeding?" Voiced out from behind. Officer Mag and Gustav were also dumbfounded. Cough, cough, cough. The others, who were also unconscious, began to cough as black blood trickled out the sides of their mouths. "Kararwaich, Kararwaich, Kararwaich." Everyone was dumbfounded as they saw the 4 cadet skins blowed up. The outline of some weird worm-looking things began to appear underneath their skins, crawling from place to place across their bodies. It appeared on their arms, legs, face, neck, and every visible part of their bodies, making the 4 cadets look grotesque. "What's happening to them?" Gustav asked with a dumbfounded expression. Officer Mag's eyes widened as she quickly grabbed hold of Gustav's hand and turned around. Surrounding all 5 of them in a bubble of gravitational force, she flew forward with Gustav, Gremlin, and Eldris. Whoosh! The body of the 4 who were left on the ground bloated to the limit, and what came next was an immense explosion. Boom! Crumble! 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 The explosion was so large that 1/4 of the mountain was blasted apart. The huge mountain on the left had now been reduced in size. This explosion had now alerted some other officers, and they started heading towards this location with speed. Officer Mag landed on the other mountain by the side with Gustav and the rest. "What in the hell was that?" Was the first to voice out as he stared in the direction of the other mountain, which still had massive chunks of rocks rolling down its side. "Looks like whoever is controlling this whole circus was more cautious than we expected," Officer Mag responded with creased eyebrows. "Leave the rest to me, kids. I don't think they'll be coming after any cadet anytime soon. This stunt they just pulled will put every officer on the alert, and they won't be able to make any move on you 4, she added. "Oh, I'm hoping they make a move on me, all right." Gustav wasn't in any way satisfied with the present state of things. "Isn't it bad that they won't make any move? Won't this make it harder for them to be caught?" Eldris voiced out from the side. "No. I already have a lead. They'll catch the officer pulling strings from the shadows in a few days," Officer Mag responded. They'll still keep my eyes peeled in the meantime. The moment I notice anything strange, I'm taking action," Gustav responded before jumping off the mountain. Eldris and followed after him. Gremlin had woken up at this time and wanted to go with them, but Officer Mag stopped him. "You're coming with me," she voiced out before flying away with him, not giving him any chance to retort. Officer Mag decided to go inspect the location of the explosion once again for any clues as other officers began to troop towards the location. 30 minutes later, Gustav, Eldris, and Timmy were on the corridor leading to their rooms discussing. Timmy explained how he was out here earlier with Gremlin when a strange force suddenly knocked him aside. The force held him there tightly, and he could hear Gremlin screaming in the background. He activated his bloodline and tried freeing himself from the hold, and just when he did, he found himself in another location. He figured he was teleported against his will. By the time he got back here, Gremlin was gone. He had tried looking for EE and Eldris to give them the news so they could look for Gremlin, but they were nowhere to be found. He had also been searching for Gremlin during the last hour and had to come back here to check for Eldris and EE again when he met all three of them in the corridor. He was relieved to hear that Gremlin was okay, but he was really shocked after hearing about the whole situation. He never thought such a thing would happen within the camp. It was inevitable that the news about the deaths of 4 cadets would spread across the camp. This was also something the officer pulling the strings from behind would want to happen. So what happens now? Eldris asked. I already have a theory about this whole thing. Once I've concluded on my investigations, I'll take action, Gustav said with a deep stare before moving towards his room. Gustav spent the rest of the day channeling his bloodline and planning his move. I sensed a familiar energy when that explosion was about to occur. The system suddenly voiced out internally as Gustav was seated in his personal channeling room. So did I, Gustav responded. So, do you think it's him? The system asked. Chapter 471. He's the only one that comes to mind. They also said he was gonna defeat me one day. Such an awfully familiar line, don't you think? Gustav chuckled at this point. And I thought for a second that he was changing. I guess I was wrong. There is no redemption for him, Gustav added. Why don't you keep watching him in the meantime? His punishment is gonna end in a week anyways, the system proposed. I've issued the death battle. It's going to take place a week before I leave for my mission as long as he accepts, Gustav said with an expressionless tone. You do know that killing him doesn't change the fact that there's still someone out there controlling a group of cadets for nefarious purposes and can end their life in an instant if they please, the system stated. That's none of my concern. Let the instructors handle that themselves. Endrick is more of a danger than all of the group members combined. Ending him is the main goal for me right now, Gustav responded. You're not thinking clearly about this whole situation. For this to happen means that whoever is behind the scenes is also after you. Endrick gone doesn't mean that person is gone. They can come for you again in the future. A hidden enemy is more dangerous than a known enemy, no matter how powerful a known enemy is. If they're out in the open, you know what steps to take to neutralize them if you do your research. The same thing cannot be said about an enemy you know nothing about, the system explained lengthily. I'm not leaving someone as dangerous as Endrick around while I'm away. I will end him this time, and whoever this hidden enemy is, I'll deal with them. Now enough of this discussion, I need to continue channeling my bloodlines. Gustav ended his statements and closed his eyes once again. Arg, you're so dumb. Don't you know you could use Endrick to uncover the rest of them? The system voiced out before keeping quiet since Gustav ignored her last sentence and continued channeling his bloodlines. As the days went by, Gustav stopped watching Endrick. Instead, he focused on keeping his eyes on suspicious students, so in a kind of way, he was helping Officer Mag keep an eye out for students that may be in the said group while also visiting the dungeon. Officer Mag kept him up to speed on the situation with the officer, and she mentioned that she was close to catching the culprit, and by the end of the week, she would have. On this particular day, he visited the dungeon once again with the intention of going below level 16 today. The cadets were having a display of powerful attacks in the coming week, so Gustav wanted to train well enough because he had decided to use that to take over the first position from Elevera. Currently, on the ranking, he was second place, but it would seem the rankings boards hadn't decided he was the strongest yet based on not seeing him perform any feat stronger than what Elevera had displayed. He decided that if this still didn't work, then he would have to duel with Elevera. This was something he was interested in, and so was she, but both of them were worried about going all out and inflicting incurable damage on the other. Gustav believed that if he went all out, Elevera might get killed, and with her level of strength, he couldn't be pulling punches or head lose. Alevra was also worried about the same thing, but if it came down to it, Gustav didn't mind. He was interested in having the first spot before he left for his first mission. Indrik kept going to meet Officer Mag in his free time as expected, and since this was the last week, he was feeling weird as he moved towards the simulation room today. What is wrong with me? Am I actually feeling weird because my training with this woman will end this week? Indrik didn't understand what was going on with him. He entered the simulation room and memories of the last 3 months played out in his mind. Arfurg, let me go, you cruel woman. Indrik groaned and shouted out in pain as Officer Mag sat on his back while reading a small book. Indrik was being held down by a strong gravitational force that kept increasing the more he struggled. At this point, his bones were starting to make creaking sounds due to his stubbornness. Just give in. You can't do anything about it. Officer Mag mumbled with an unbothered voice, but didn't take her eyes off the book in her hand for a second. Never. Arfurg, let me go, you witch. Indrik was still as stubborn as ever and kept struggling to free himself, even to the point of trying to use his will against Officer Mag. Your will is nothing within my gravitational field. Just give it up. Stop being stubborn, you motherless prick. Officer Mag voiced out again. I have a mother. Arg. You're a witch. You're cruel. You're vile. Arg. Let me go. Indrik kept shouting out, and the gravitational force kept increasing. Now I doubt that, Officer Mag voiced out before she continued reading her book. Their mother must have been one crooked woman who lacked the skills of proper home training, Officer Mag said internally while shaking her head in pity. Arfurg. Indrik kept struggling for over 30 minutes. As time passed, his struggling screams slowly turned into painful screams and then pleading ones. At this point, nearly every bone in his body had been broken. The ground underneath had been cracked due to the force of his body pressing against it. Officer Mag sitting on his back didn't help the situation one bit. Please. I apologize. I'm sorry. Make it stop. Arg. He screamed out again as another bone in his body made loud popping sounds. He had never felt such excruciating pain in his lifetime. Remembering Gustav's last beating, he felt that didn't compare to having every bone in the body under torture. Are you truly sorry, or you just want the pain to stop? Officer Mag asked as she closed her book. Chapter 472. Are you truly sorry, or you just want the pain to stop? Officer Mag asked as she closed her book. I am sorry. I apologize, Indrik pleaded. I will let you off the hook for now, Officer Mag said before standing to her feet as she deactivated the gravitational force pressing down on Indrik. Indrik moaned in relief after this action, and Officer Mag proceeded to give him a recovery pill. He slowly healed up, and when he was strong enough, he picked himself up with a look of embarrassment. You wicked bitch, how could you do that to me? He voiced out towards Officer Mag again. I'm leaving, he voiced out and turned to the side to start heading towards the entrance. However, just after taking a few steps forward, he felt immense pressure from above. This time he seemed to be ready as he quickly raised his hands and created a telekinetic wall above himself with his will. Bang! It sounded like two strong forces had collided as Indrik's knees caved the instant the gravitational force pressed down on his telekinetic wall. He groaned loudly as his knees began to lower even more while he used every ounce of energy he could muster to hold back the gravitational force. Officer Mag slowly turned from her sitting position with the book still in her hand. She didn't look like she was even trying at all, while Indrik currently looked like he was trying to pass a shit as his hands were still raised up and his knees kept buckling. You really think you're something special, don't you? Officer Mag voiced out as she closed her book. The instant the book made the slapping sound after closing, the gravitational force suddenly increased with so much intensity that Indrik's kneecaps made snapping sounds as he fell face down while screaming in pain. Bang! The instantaneous increase of the gravitational force slammed into his entire body as the telekinetic wall he created up was destroyed. Blood splattered across the place as Indrik's body made a small hole in the ground, and he passed out instantly. Well, looks like I used too much power, Officer Mag said with a contemplative tone as she retracted her gravitational force. She moved over to check on Indrik's vitals, and sighed in relief after seeing that he was still alive. She fed him recovery pills once again and waited for him to regain consciousness. After a few more minutes, Indrik woke up again and tried to leave once more but was swatted towards the ground and crushed like a bug under the weight of Officer Mag's gravitational force. Understand that you're nothing special. There are many others better than you are. I could end you with ease if I wanted to, Officer Mag kept saying as she inflicted pain on Indrik every time he tried leaving. Hours later, Indrik had run out of energy and stared at Officer Mag like she was a beast. You want more? I could keep going for weeks since you seem to love pain, Officer Mag voiced out as she stared at Indrik, who was seated on the floor with a defeated look. Indrik sat there and didn't respond as he kept staring downwards. That's what I thought, Officer Mag said as she stood up from her seating position and moved towards Indrik. Now we will begin your training. You're not to leave this place for the next 1 week, Officer Mag voiced out next. 1 week? Indrik blurted out with a tone of disapproval. You have a problem with that? She asked with a glare. No. But what of the other trainings? He asked gently after seeing her glare. You can forget about all those for now. No instructor wants you in their training anyways, she said as she turned around. Dang it. I won't be able to communicate with anyone. Indrik gritted his teeth with a look of annoyance as this thought came to mind. Your first task. Get on your knees and create a barrier around yourself using your will. I will attack it every 10 minutes using a small portion of my strength. If it gets destroyed in one hit, it'll crush you with my gravitational force again and heal you afterwards. Get ready to be in a lot of pain, Mr. Special, Officer Mag said before taking her to sit somewhere in the simulation room again. Oh, that's so easy, Indrik scoffed as he proceeded to do as he was told. He created a circular telekinetic barrier around himself and waited for the attack. Officer Mag continued reading her book as Indrik sat in place. 10 minutes passed, and yet Officer Mag didn't attack. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 50 minutes, 1 hour. Hey, I'm still here waiting. Indrik was starting to get impatient and shouted out. His energy was being depleted as he kept the telekinetic force, and he was tired of staying in the same position. Officer Mag ignored his exclamations and kept reading. In a blink of an eye, another hour went by, and Indrik was already pissed at the moment. He glared daggers at Officer Mag, who still kept ignoring him. Just when he felt this might all be some kind of hoax, Officer Mag suddenly threw her book forward with immense force. Swayai! It cut through the air like a blade as it traveled forward like a spiraling streak. Bang! It broke through Indrik's protective barrier with ease and slammed into his face. Fly! The impact sent Indrik tumbling backward as he slid across the floor. He laid in that position for a while with a defeated expression as his face turned red. Hey, that was unfair. You said you were going to attack in 10 minutes and now it's over 2 hours. He suddenly jumped up with a look of annoyance as he voiced out. Shut up. You had one task and you failed, she voiced out, cutting him short. Fwye! Bang! Immense gravitational force descended from above, smashing Indrik to the floor once again. He screamed out in pain and pleaded, but it all fell on deaf ears. Chapter 473. After torturing him for about 20 minutes with her gravitational force, Officer Mag deactivated it and fed him recovery pills again. They went at it again when Indrik regained consciousness. He decided not to go against Officer Mag this time in fear of being punished. However, once again, Officer Mag did not stick to the time she mentioned, and he started getting angry and impatient. The next attack broke through his barrier again, and Officer Mag crushed him once more with her gravitational force. This continued for about 3 days, and Indrik kept failing to prevent the attacks from getting through even though they were quite weak. Bang! Once again, Officer Mag got him, and this time she decided to speak. You use the power of will, but not only do you lack patience, but you're also hot-headed. People with such abilities are always calm because the power of will works with mental capacity, mostly bordering on focus. You are so quick to get angered and also impatient, which is why your telekinesis will never reach the full potential of its strength. It's easy to defeat you if your opponent understands your character even though they're weaker. They can prey on your immature personality and use it against you. The calmer you are, the more focused you'll be, which will strengthen your will. It's good for any fighter to know this, and you need to practice on that even more, Officer Mag voiced out lengthily, causing Indrik to show an expression of reflection. Officer Mag stared at him with one eyebrow raised before turning around. This is also why your brother will always be better than you, because during battle he knows to be calm in every situation, and he doesn't even have the power of will. As this statement was voiced out, Indrik suddenly raised his head up with a look of rage in his eyes. Shum! His eyes turned completely light blue in color as the wind started circulating around him, blowing his curly hair backward. He is not better than me, Indrik voiced out with a loud tone of rage. Officer Mag turned around to look at him. Oh, did I touch a nerve? See how you're so easily triggered, she voiced out. The instant Indrik heard that, his face froze as his eyes slowly started to return to normal, and he sat back down. Now that's more like it. I understand that rage and desire also fuels will, but you'll always be on the losing end if you're not the one in control, so learn to stay calm in every situation, she said while turning around to keep moving towards her seating position again. Time out, she said after sitting. Why exactly do you get triggered by your brother? Why do you dislike your brother so much? She asked. Because he's trash. And he will always be trash, Indrik voiced out with a spiteful look as he gnashed his teeth. Officer Mag stared at him with a look of intent. So RRY, he said as he calmed himself. It's all right, you're learning. Officer Mag let him off the hook this time. But we both know he's not trash, so why would you call him that? In fact, he's one of the powerful, if not most powerful, first-year cadet, Officer Mag said as she recalled everything she knew about Gustav, and even the time he purposely faked his test scores, which he was very well aware of. He's not. He didn't used to be. I am better. I was better. Indrik had a conflicted look on his face as he stuttered while speaking. Yes, we all know the story of how he went through a phase and his bloodline underwent a late evolution, Officer Mag responded. So give me a solid reason why you dislike him to the point of hate, Officer Mag requested. That's because he is stealing my spotlight. I should be the one getting praise from everyone. I should be the one getting fawned upon by these lesser mixed bloods. He used to be so weak he would hide under my shelter, and now... Indrik had to stop at this point because he realized he was already breathing in and out profusely. Silence. Officer Mag stared at him for seconds, without saying a single word, with a look of pity. Indrik didn't understand why she was staring at him like that, but he didn't know what to say. Everything you mentioned so far, none of them are solid. Officer Mag finally broke the silence. Indrik was about to retort, but she cut him off before he could. Maybe you missed the part where he bullied you. Or you two fought a few times and he inflicted injuries on you in your younger years. Did you also miss the part where he treated you like a pile of dung? Where he insulted you, or forced you to do something against your will? Officer Mag stated. Indrik's mouth opened up like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find any words. That's what I thought, she added while shaking her head. Their mother must have been one demented psycho to raise a child this way. It won't be easy to change his mode of reasoning, Officer Mag thought internally. Now let's continue. Remember to be calm this time, she voiced out before giving Indrik some time to prepare his barrier. This time she waited for about 5 hours before implementing an attack, and this time Indrik was able to prevent it from phasing through. They did it several times more before she moved on to a new type of training for him. When their full 1-week isolated training ended, Indrik was already starting to act a little different. She instructed him to proceed towards this place the instant he had free time after training, and from then, their training continued. Officer Mag completely tamed Indrik in the past 3 months, making him turn completely meek in her presence. Whenever he misbehaved, she always knew just what to do to him, and occasionally, they would have talked about him and Gustav. Without knowing, he was slowly starting to relinquish the hate he had for Gustav within. Indrik's mind returned back to the present as he noticed Officer Mag's appearance within the simulation room. Mr. Special, shall we? She said while inviting him towards one part of the simulation room. Why are you still calling me that? Chapter 474. Mr. Special, shall we? She said while inviting him towards one part of the simulation room. Why are you still calling me that? Indrik asked with a slightly disturbed look. Oh, Did you forget claiming that you were special? Officer Mag responded with a dismissive stare. Yes, stop that, it sounds kinda obnoxious and cocky. Indrik responded with a repressed gaze. Are you sure? Officer Mag asked. H&M, can we just carry on with today's training, please? Indrik proposed. All right. Might I remind you, this torture ends for you this week, just as it also ends for me. After this, we can both go back to our normal livelihood within the MBO, Officer Mag announced. Oh, yeah. A wry smile appeared on Indrik's face as Officer Mag made the announcement. Now first off, I'll check the current stage of your will, Officer Mag said while moving towards Indrik with a small device in her hand. Moving it close to Indrik, she activated it and checked what she intended to. Gustav, at the moment, was currently dealing with a group of mixed breeds within the 16th level of the dungeon. A group of two-headed lizard men mixed breeds who breathed fire with one head and ice in the other enclosed Gustav on all sides within this underground-looking passageway that neither had an exit or an entrance. Jumping up in the air and spinning several times, Gustav landed in between two of these creatures and stabbed out fiercely with both palms. Poochie Poochie, the tip of his fingers coated in milky-colored energy, pierced through the left and right neck of both two-headed lizard men simultaneously. As green blood oozed down his fingertips, the creatures still seemed to be alive, although one of their heads had gone offline due to Gustav's stabbing. Zurhum. Zoom. Two pillars of fire and ice were being shot towards his location at the same time. Gustav quickly turned to the side and grabbed hold of the one on the left, putting it in front of himself. Bang! The creature was instantly burned and froze to death. Half of its body was shaped into an ice crystal as it stood in place, while the other half was roasted to ash. Gustav proceeded to grab hold of the next one by the tail and ran forward while swinging it around. Bang! 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 As the lizardmen's bodies were smashed into each other, blood was sent, spilling everywhere. Gustav made sure to dodge the rest of the fire and ice being shot out from different spots. The temperature of the place had been messed up at this point. It was both a mixture of hot and cold, but Gustav remained unaffected as he massacred the creatures one after the other. After a few more minutes, the battle ended, and all that could be seen were the scattered bodies all around the place of the lizardmen. About 30 of them had attacked him all at once, and now all 30 of them had become past tense, all without a single body part completely intact. SSHHHSSS. An opening appeared on the northeast side of the massive tunnelway, and this opening had stairs that led further down. Now it's time to challenge the 17th level, Gustav muttered as he walked towards that part of the dungeon. Hours went by, and it was finally time to leave the dungeon since he still had to attend one more training session for the day. At the moment, Gustav was currently soaked in blood that included both his and the creatures he had been fighting. Looks like 24 is my limit for now, Gustav said as he fell to the ground, laying beside the massive body of a creature that covered up to 400 feet of space. This creature had a massive hole in its body where the ground could be seen from it. It had already lost its life earlier, along with 3 more that looked similar to it scattered across the place. He still hasn't tried using the mixture of the energy from the border and the energy from the crystal he found within the mountain because he was afraid he would alert the instructors after usage. However, he had pretty much used every single ability in his arsenal to get to this level. I should be able to defeat that creature now. Gustav remembered the serpentine mixed breed within the border. He remembered just how much he had been awed that such a powerful creature existed, and he couldn't imagine how long it'd take to reach the level where he could defeat it. It had been up to 6 months since his last encounter with it, and then he could only use Yarki to bring it under control, but his attacks were still weak that they could barely cause any damage to it. He had already decided that he would find time to visit the neighborhood area after he got out of here for his first mission. Gustav stood to his feet after resting for a few seconds and dashed across the place, stabbing his hand into different parts of the creature's body. He took several internal organs of these creatures and kept them within his storage device. Mara still needs these for her project, Gustav muttered. According to Mara, she was working on a project where she needed organs of strong mixed breeds along with a lot of other ingredients. Gustav had to share his pass points with her because she ended up finishing hers while getting the ingredients needed for her experiment. Working on personal projects meant lesser free resources, which meant a cadet in the scientific field would have to use their points to purchase items they needed. Mara did this and ended up using hers completely and still couldn't purchase everything she needed. She was quite the science freak and kept persuading Gustav that once her experiment became a success, he would be the first person to benefit from it. Chapter 475. All this was, she hoped that Gustav would assist her somehow since she was literally running short on funds. Gustav, of course, just laughed it off and told her her explanation wasn't necessary, and she could come to him for assistance at any time. Gustav started heading back towards the surface of the dungeon after taking all the necessitates needed. In 2 days, the officer who was assisting the formerly unknown group of cadets was finally caught by Officer Mag. Word spread around camp about how the instructor who killed the 4 cadets had been caught. This was one of the 3 combat instructors, Officer Kendrick. Everyone was finding it difficult to believe, mostly because he acted kind to the cadets and would even encourage some to come to see him after the training session for personal training, just like the other 2. Officer Cora was the main instructor for the combat training session, so he was asked to come in for questioning. Since Officer Kendrick was his subordinate, he was also seen as a suspect. This made Angie seriously worried because she knew just how much of a nice person Officer Cora was. He had been personally training her for months now and had never given her any reason to suspect him in any way. Gustav made his way to Commander Celia's office, hours after the news spread across the camp. He already communicated with Officer Mag to meet at the office. Minutes later, they were both in her office discussing. "How did you catch him?" Gustav asked. "How is that any of your business? Is that why you called me here?" Officer Mag said while raising one eyebrow. "Oh, I felt like he hasn't spoken or answered to any of your questions. I'm also guessing the brain-tweaking device doesn't work on him, which means y'all can't truly figure out the motive behind this situation and the other cadets involved," Gustav stated lengthily. Officer Mag's eyes showed surprise as she heard Gustav list out the situation accurately. "So I was right. Whoever that is truly behind this took a lot of precautions as expected," Gustav said internally after noticing the look on Officer Mag's face. "So?" Officer Mag asked. "Well, I have information, but how did you catch him, though?" Gustav asked again. "I set a trap and fell for it," Officer Mag stated before proceeding to narrate how it happened. She allowed a rumor to circulate where it was mentioned that Gremlin already knew the identity of the special class cadet in the unknown group. Doing this, she lured out the group again as they came after Gremlin secretively. This time Officer Mag made sure to keep her attention on the main control room within the MBO camp. There was a technological device called the Oracle. This device made it possible to check out scenarios that had gone down in any location within camp so long as the right coordinates were inputted. They mostly made use of the device when the invisible, flying cams were unable to capture an event that happened in a location due to unavailability or not being in that area. If something serious happened, they would use the Oracle to uncover the truth. However, the situation with Gustav and Vera wasn't found due to someone messing with the Oracle, causing the footage to disappear. Officer Mag had managed to lure out the group and focused on the main control room this time because she could tell that the officer involved would try to hide the activities of the group he sent out by messing with the Oracle again. This was how Officer Mag caught him. No one knew anything about her and Gustav investigating the issue in the first place, so she had been able to execute this well. "So I have a list of names of suspicious cadets. I have spent the last week monitoring everyone's movements, and you'll find at least 2 or 3 of these cadets to be culprits as well," Gustav said as he passed on a holographic list to Officer Mag. "When you say all, do you mean the entire first years?" Officer Mag asked with an expression of disbelief. "Yes, all 2,637 of them," Gustav responded. "How?" she asked while scrolling through the list. "Now that's none of your business, is it, Officer Mag?" Gustav said while proceeding to leave the office. "I may be inaccurate about some of them, but I'm sure you'll be able to get a few from that list," Gustav added before leaving the office. Officer Mag was in awe. It was a list of 20 names. She knew Gustav didn't mess around with things as important as this, so she didn't doubt that he had truly spent the entire week inspecting everyone. This kid. What she didn't know was that Gustav had inputted some innocent cadet's name, since he didn't want to be 100% accurate with the list. It would be suspicious if everyone on the list was truly a part of that unknown group. How Gustav achieved this was quite simple. All the time he had spent within the camp, he stored a lot of life signs. Gustav had saved the life sign of every single person in camp, the instructors included. Making use of this, Gustav would spy on the cadets and finally uncover the group. As expected, Indrik was part of them, and he happened to be the special class they were referring to. At this point, Gustav understood that the attempt to implicate him and get him to lose his officer title must have been Indrik's plan. Gustav didn't add Indrik's name to the list he handed to Officer Mag because he had decided he was going to handle Indrik himself. Indrik, this will spell your end. There's no redemption for you. Now that Gustav had found the source of the incident, he had no more mercy left in him. In his room, Indrik stood beside the window staring into space as a variety of thoughts seeped into his mind. Those idiots, I didn't expect that they would try to frame him behind my back, just so they could get to delay him in camp for longer. All because that man wants me to defeat him before he makes a name for himself. Indrik sighed before moving to sit down. Should I tell him everything? Chapter 476. Those idiots, I didn't expect that they would try to frame him behind my back, just so they could get to delay him in camp for longer. All because that man wants me to defeat him before he makes a name for himself. Indrik sighed before moving to sit down. Should I tell him everything? Indrik thought hard for a few minutes before shaking it off his mind. No. I can't tell him anything now till I find a way to help her, Indrik decided with a troubled look. 2 days later within a study, a man sporting long brown hair clad in an azure-colored business suit sat down listening to a large male in a black bodysuit and a mask. This man was none other than Hung Zhou and his subordinate. So you're telling me that every single one of the first years with the Nanites have been singled out? Hung Zhou asked. Every one of them except for Indrik. The huge man responded. How? Could Indrik have betrayed me? Hung Zhou wondered out loud. Impossible. What did the others say in their report? Hung proceeded to ask. Sir, I think you're forgetting that Kendrick has been caught. The man in front voiced out. Who cares about that ant? He's very much replaceable. There are still others. I'm more concerned about how they caught up to this, Hung Zhou answered with a cold tone. The others in the shadow are also at loss about how this happened. All they could say was the whole situation turned out for the worse from the moment Gustav was target. The man explained. Gustav, Hung Zhou felt something inside him click the moment he heard Gustav's name being mentioned. Wasn't it mentioned that he met up with the camp commander and also arrived there before they could kill the kid that was taken? Hung Zhou asked. According to the eyewitness report of the ones in the shadows, this is accurate, the man responded. That kid definitely has something to do with the uncovering of the cadets we have under our control. Hung Zhou's eyes squinted as he pointed this out. Pass the message to Indrik that he has to kill Gustav before he leaves for his first mission. He will be assisted with whatever tools he needs to complete this task, Hung Zhou instructed. What if he says no? According to the contract between you two, he doesn't have to obey your commands till after his training in the MBO, the huge man voiced out. He won't. He also despises his brother, Hung Zhou answered before reaching out to grab the tea of cup by the side. The man nodded in response and turned around to head out as Hung Zhou took a sip from the cup of tea. Refusal is not an option. They'll have to activate the Nanites if he shows any form of hesitation. It was early, around 4 a.m. in camp currently. Within a girly-looking room with pinkish decorations and concert posters, a girl could be seen laying on the bed with her eyes closed. She had silver and pink-colored hair with 2 small horns protruding out of the sides of her forehead. Pant, pant, pant. She kept breathing in and out profusely as she turned from side to side across the bed. Huff. She suddenly sat up as her eyes sprang open with a look of fear visible within. Sweat dabbled down her face, and some were trapped on her brows and forehead. After a few more seconds of breathing in and out, Angie calmed down. She pulled the blanket from her body as she moved to the side of the bed and placed her legs on the floor. HNG. Angie suddenly felt a stabbing pain in her thighs as her legs made contact with the floor. She grabbed hold of her thighs due to reflex action, and she was wearing green tight-fitted shorts so she could see her thighs as she turned on the light. What's this? She wondered as she saw some black lines similar to the look of veins outlines on the skin displayed on her thighs. After a few more seconds, the pain disappeared along with the black lines, and her thighs returned to normal. Angie stood to her feet and moved around to confirm that her thighs were fine now. She decided to brush it off as she checked the time and sat down back on her bed. Weird dream. Angie recalled the nightmare she had a while ago. Coupling it with what she had just experienced a while back, she kept having this weird feeling of foreboding. I need to check on Gustav. Maybe I should also go for a medical checkup to be sure that everything's all right. Angie decided on how she was going to spend her free time today. Instructor Cora was still being investigated, so he would not be giving her any personal training in the meantime. Angie was going to have a lot of time to spend by herself, so she decided on how she was going to make use of it today. The day went by quite fast with the usual routine, and today was also the day Indrik's training with Officer Mag was going to end. Gustav spent his free time doing personal training while Officer Mag had one last sparring session with Indrik. Indrik had grown quite stronger in the past 3 months, as well due to Officer Mag's sessions. His will was now way stronger, and he was starting to notice that he didn't easily get ticked by words anymore. This is the end, kid. You don't have to keep coming here anymore after today, Officer Mag said as their sparring session ended. Indrik mumbled with a slightly dejected expression. What's with that response? Don't tell me you'll miss all the pain I inflicted on you, Officer Mag voiced out as a smirk appeared on her face. Huh? What? Miss you? No way, Indrik quickly denied and turned around to leave. Chapter 477. Officer Mag chuckled as she saw him walk away quickly. Indrik stopped a few feet away from the entrance and spoke. Do you think I should talk to him? I don't even know how to approach him, Indrik said with a low tone. How do you feel about him now? Do you still despise him? Officer Mag asked. I don't think so, but I think he despises me, Indrik responded. Well, unlike him, you actually did some despicable acts to him back in the days, but I'm sure it's nothing you two can't sort out. You should go with the intention of tendering an apology, Officer Mag advised. I'll try, Indrik said before he continued walking forward. Just as he got to the entrance, he paused once again before turning around. Thank you, he said while bowing slightly before turning around to leave through the entrance. Officer Mag nodded slightly in response before walking towards a part of the simulation room. Gustav and Angie met later in the day in one of the training facilities. Within a room that was simulated to look like a jungle, both of them stood opposite each other discussing. Are you planning something? Angie asked. What do you mean by planning something? I'm always planning everything, Gustav asked and responded to his own question with a strong tone. I know. Not that. I mean, are you planning anything big? Angie asked while rolling her eyes. Do you mind specifying? Gustav asked while raising one eyebrow. The 4 cadets losing their lives was attributed to you, and them being in an unknown group. It was said that a battle broke out between you and them, and then that happened. That's something big which looks like something you'd have been planning for a while, Angie said with a suspicious gaze. Oh, that I didn't actually plan that. It just happened. So your definition of big is you asking if I'm going to be killing anyone soon, right? Gustav asked. Angie kept staring at him with a gaze of confirmation. Oh yeah, of course I am, Gustav responded casually. What? Who? Angie asked with a tone of worry. That has nothing to do with you. Why did I even agree to meet you? We're not on talking terms, remember? Gustav said. Because she's the love of your life, remember? The system suddenly chipped in within him. Shut it. Gustav responded internally before turning around. Angie suddenly held Gustav's arm to stop him from leaving. Please wait. I just have a very bad feeling recently. Tell me who you're planning to kill, Angie requested. Gustav turned to the side to stare at her briefly before pulling his arm from her grip forcefully. Someone that should already be gone if not for your silly interference, Gustav responded before walking away. Angie's eyes closed slightly as she heard that and stared at Gustav walking away. Indrik. Just as I thought. My nightmare. This made Angie recall her nightmare, which made her really worried. But after thinking about it for some time, she brushed it off. Gustav won't lose to Indrik no matter what, she said internally, calming herself. Indrik had already arrived back in his room at this time and was currently sitting on his bed, coming up with lines to say. Hey bro, I apologize for all those years it was because. Hey Gustav, it's my fault for not being. Hey man, I joined others in harming you. Arg, I can't come up with anything. Indrik slapped his forehead as he fell back on his bed with a frustrated look. After a few more minutes of contemplation, he sat up once again. I think I got something now, Indrik muttered as he started formulating a new line in his mind. Just as he wanted to speak again, he heard a knock at the door. He walked up to it and opened it, only to find a small box placed in front. He bent to pick up the box and brought it inside after closing the door. He opened it up, and a holographic image of a message suddenly appeared. Have a death match with Gustav before he leaves for his first mission and kill him. Any tool or gadget you need for this task to be executed successfully will be provided for you. Young Joe, as Indrik read the message, his face creased up. You bastard. I will only kill who I want to. I don't have to obey your commands till after my training here. Indrik voiced out with a tone of annoyance as the box lifted into the air and got crushed by an invisible force. Fwye. Its remaining parts flew towards the wall, slammed into it, and fell to the floor. This message threw Indrik off, and he started prancing around the room as thoughts started appearing in his mind. The next week came, and it was finally time for the cadets to display their most powerful attacks to the group of inspectors who were being sent by the higher-ups within the MBO. Today was devoid of any training because different settings had been made for the cadets to show their strength. It was like a test, but it wasn't really a test. The higher-ups were only there to see their improvement. The cadets had been waiting for this since this was also a chance for them to prove their strength had truly increased. The inspectors were not really concerned about who was the strongest because this wasn't the purpose of coming to inspect today. They were more concerned about those with the best improvements among all cadets, and there was a particular way this would be graded. There was also a chance of normal cadets becoming special class through this if their improvement was seen as one of the best in camp. Gustav moved towards the display location along with EE, Ildris, Falco, Timi, and Ria. The place where the display would be held was different from what they had expected. It wasn't anything like a stadium or a battle ring. Instead, it was more like a city. Chapter 478. The place where the display would be held was different from what they had expected. It wasn't anything like a stadium or a battle ring. Instead, it was more like a city. The cadets and the investigators spectating had a facility within this city-like place where they all stayed. Apparently, it was a city created for tests and training within the MBO. It was fairly large, with residential and business buildings positioned all across the place. Gustav and the others arrived there on time. They took their seat in the facility, which happened to be a kind of tower situated behind the city. There was a massive, transparent wall in front of the seating area where everyone could see the city from their seating position. There were also projections that displayed different parts of the small city as well. The 4 inspectors from the higher-ups sat at the northwest corner within the facility clad in ash and red-colored uniform, which showed that their ranks were higher than that of all the instructors. As every first-year cadet arrived, one of the instructors moved to the front as the event began. I will now explain your tasks for today. Instructor Bryant voiced out as he gestured at the city in front. This is a city just like in the outside world built only for the purpose of training an event like this. You all will be tasked with protecting different sections of this city in front, Instructor Bryant explained as he gestured towards the city. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The place turned a little noisy as Officer Bryant got to that point, because some of the cadets were wondering why Officer Bryant was mentioning protection when they were prepared to display their most powerful abilities. Whatever section of the city you're tasked with protecting has to be kept safe while you attack whatever threatens its safety. As Officer Bryant reached this point, a holographic image of a black, round, metallic-looking ball writhing with electricity appeared in the air for everyone to see. You are to destroy this before it lands in the city. Every ball has a particular amount of force, strength, and thickness, and it increases in these stats the more you destroy. If a ball eventually manages to drop on that section of the city where you're meant to protect, you will be scored based on how many you manage to destroy. As Officer Bryant got to this point, The cadets had looks of understanding on their faces. You're not allowed to help another cadet deal with their section, and you're meant to control the force of your attack to make sure your assigned section of the city is not damaged because of you, Instructor Brian added. After all, this was said. The cadets waited for their names to be called one after the other. According to Instructor Bryant, only 500 cadets could be assigned to city sections at a time, so there would be different batches. The special class cadets were not going to be among these batches because, according to the inspectors, they wanted the special class cadets to be assigned to 2 different sections of the city at the same time. They also wanted to focus specifically on the special class when they were performing this task, unlike the normal cadets. The latter was about 500 in number going at a time. They obviously wouldn't be able to notify everyone. They also felt the special class cadets should always be made to do more. The 500 cadets whose names were called moved forward as expected and were teleported to different parts of the city. As they arrived on the section they were meant to protect, they looked around. There were about 18 buildings in the vicinity, and light could be seen coming out of the drawn structure on the ground that surrounded these 18 buildings, forming a kind of rectangular barricade. This depicted that the section ended where the lights were located, and the buildings and roads were meant to be protected. Each section was like a small street. Some were lucky to find themselves in residential areas with small-sized buildings. In contrast, the unlucky ones found themselves amidst high-rise buildings like skyscrapers. Those who found themselves in areas with high-rise buildings started making their way to the top of one of the buildings. This was mostly because it was easier for the balls to hit one of the buildings if they remained at ground level. They felt they would be able to react better if they were on higher ground. A few minutes after the cadets had arrived at their sections, Officer Bryant announced the beginning of the event. They all became alert after the announcement and prepared to attack. Shroom, 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 shroom. A few seconds later, everyone could hear loud sounds coming from the sky like something was traveling through it at a fast speed. They looked up, and in the next few moments, massive black balls started raining from the sky. They descended towards different locations in the city with force and speed. It looked as if meteors were descending from outer space with the speed at which they were moving. Those who had noticed one coming towards their section of the city prepared to attack. The moment it reached points where they knew their attacks could reach, the cadets began sending out attacks simultaneously. Boom, 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 boom. Different kinds of attacks were sent into the sky, and sounds of explosions rang out across the place with every collision. In a few seconds, the skies had been cleared, and everyone had managed to destroy the balls before they could land in their section of the city. Not every section was attacked in this first round since it was random, but everyone was still on the alert as they waited for the next round. The sky still had smokes and some kind of coloring due to the massive number of attacks sent out earlier. Chapter 479. Within the facility where the other cadets and instructors and the inspectors were gathered, a board had already appeared on the side of the large hall. It displayed scores of the cadets that were currently in different sections of the city. A few moments later, the same sound as earlier could be heard as the clouds burst apart, revealing more of those black balls. The cadets who found themselves on tall buildings moved away from their current location to another part because the ball's trajectory was different from where it was headed for the last time. They quickly jumped several buildings and stared up towards the arriving black ball that was the size of a boulder. Attacks were once again sent upwards: electricity, fireballs, energy attacks, fist strikes, and so many different ones. As long as the force of their attack was enough, once the force collided with the ball, it exploded. The balls exploded when they received a particular amount of damage, which prevented fragments from falling towards the buildings in the sections. This way, protection was easier as long as the cadet was powerful enough. This continued for about 10 minutes, and every new round, the balls were always faster and stronger than the initial. As time passed, the cadets' attacks were beginning to become less and less effective. Some of them would have to attack the same ball about 3 to 4 times before totally getting rid of it. Boom. A section of the city was incinerated as one of the balls landed on a building, causing ripples of destruction to spread across the place. The cadet had failed to stop it even after attacking it several times. Luckily, the supervisors teleported him the instant the ball made contact with one of the buildings. More and more cadets were unable to stop the balls after this. The first ended after stopping about 9 balls. The ninth ball was considered to be 6 times stronger than the first and 3 times faster in speed, which meant the cadet did quite well, but he was still embarrassed that he was the first to fail. Other cadets failed to stop the ball in their 10th to 13th round, and only a single cadet managed to reach the 14th round before failing. Minutes later, all 500 cadets were back in their seats after being teleported back to the facility. They all stared at the holographic projection that displayed their scores as Officer Bryant started mentioning the names of the next set of cadets. The inspectors who had witnessed the first batch all had poker faces because, to them, the performance of the normal cadets was already expected, even though this batch of cadets did better than the last. The holographic projection had a side that showed that it was calculating the improvement rate of every cadet from the first batch. It displayed their most powerful attacks when they were just getting into the MBO, and the ones they had displayed a while ago. The supervisors teleported the next batch of cadets, one after the other again. They found themselves in different sections of the city, just like the previous ones. They began to also showcase their strength as the balls descended from above. About 2 hours later, every single normal class cadet had shown the strength of their attacks and had been teleported back. On the holographic projection that displayed scores of cadets, their improvement rate was also displayed by the side. Some of them had improvement rates of 400 to 500%, some around 600 to 700%, and the highest were bordering between 750 to 800%. Ria was the only normal cadet who had managed to reach a whopping sum of 900% improvement rate since his start in the MBO. It was already high to get an improvement rate of 700% as a cadet that was already quite strong on entering into the MBO. Talk more of getting 200% higher than that. The inspectors had their eyes on Ria and 2 other normal cadets after seeing their improvement rate. After all, they were mostly invested in the improvement rate than the scores. The improvement rate was calculated based on how much stronger a cadet had become since their arrival here, which meant Ria was 7 times stronger than he used to be. If Ria happened to be the person with the highest improvement rate, this didn't make him the strongest. This only showed that his rate of improvement is better and higher than the rest. Now it was finally time for the special class cadets to be transported into the city. Since they were only around 60 in number, they would be spaced across the city properly. And it was crazier for them, since they had to handle the safety of 2 sections instead of one like the others. Zing, as Gustav was teleported away, he found himself in a part of the city that had both residential and business structures. Unlike the usual 18 buildings, there were close to 40 buildings in the vicinity. Some were as large as a high-rise, and others were small in size, like bungalows, 2-stories and 3-story buildings. Gustav walked in the middle of the empty street, looking around. The buildings were so well structured, and he could even see within some buildings that there were furniture and other necessities for living there. It seemed as if the MBO missed no detail except for the lack of human life within the vicinity. This was understandable since the MBO wouldn't want to endanger anyone's life. Gustav looked up ahead towards the southeast and noticed the tall bluish mast shooting up to the sky. There were high-rise buildings in the area that were 200 to 300 stories tall, but the mast happened to be taller than them, reaching over 3,000 feet. Gustav moved forward and arrived in front of it. SSHHHMM. A certain kind of energy began to circulate around him as he descended to a particular point, crouching his knees a little. Super jump has been activated. His calves bulged immensely as the ground underneath his feet cracked just before he leaped upwards with force. Thump. Chapter 480. Super jump has been activated. His calves bulged immensely as the ground underneath his feet cracked just before he leaped upwards with force. Thump. His body ascended upwards like an ignited rocket shooting past 1,000 feet in a matter of a few seconds. The sound of the air being torn through as he traveled upwards with speed caused every other special class cadet in the vicinity to stare upwards towards that particular location. After ascending up to over 2,000 feet in height, Gustav grabbed a part of the mast and pulled himself upwards again. Zoom. In a few seconds, he ascended above the mast and landed on its tip. There was barely any room for movement at the top of the mast, so Gustav stood in place and squatted while looking around. Except for the high-rise buildings, other buildings in the vicinity looked like Lego toys to him right now. The The position of the mast wasn't accurately positioned in the middle of the two sections Gustav was assigned to, but it was very close to being in the middle. Gustav could see every single building within the two sections from his current position. He could even see other special class cadet sections. Those whose sections weren't too far away from Gustav's could see him standing at the top of the mast. Some of them who found themselves in sections that only had high-rise buildings also made their way to the top of a building. In a few more moments, everyone was prepared for the task to begin as they all stood in their desired locations staring at the sky. Officer Bryant announced the start, and just like the previous batches, these gigantic black balls began to fall from the sky. The size of the first black ball caused the spectators to be surprised due to the size being larger than the ones the normal cadets had to destroy and the speed at which it fell. Gustav noticed the one headed towards the section he was supposed to protect was heading for the high-rise building towards his far right about 200 feet away. However, it was falling in a diagonal format from the left, so he had decided to attack it without moving from his current spot. Gustav waited as he activated God Eyes to stare at the massive ball falling from the sky and make his calculations properly. Size manipulation has been activated. The moment the ball was close to flying over the mast, Gustav activated size manipulation and threw his fist upwards with force. Zoom! His entire right arm extended in length, shooting upwards with force, and just as it reached a particular height, the massive ball falling from the sky happened to appear above it. Bang! Boom! A massive sound of collision rang out, followed by an explosion as the ball exploded into bits and pieces, raining dust across the place. Gustav's extended fist began to retract after the collision. At this point, other special class cadets were also sending forth their attacks. He opened a small vortex in front of himself and punched outwards. His fist appeared right in the air beside the falling ball, slamming into it and crushing it in the process. Dark Falco slashed his claws towards the sky, causing crescent-shaped dark energy to travel forward, severing the ball in two before it landed on the ground. Other special class cadets also made use of their abilities, destroying the first wave of falling balls in a matter of seconds. Even though the first balls that were sent downwards were relatively stronger than the first ones sent downwards for the normal cadets, the special classes had managed to destroy them with ease. The second round came, and the special class cadets once again displayed their abilities by destroying the balls with ease. The spectators witnessing had awe-stricken faces as they watched the performance of the special class cadets. 30 minutes went by, and not a single special class cadet had failed to stop any of the balls. Each of them had displayed how spectacular they were in managing their energy and using powerful attacks. Although this didn't mean the weaker ones weren't already running out of energy, but lasting this long was something none of the normal cadets were able to manage, even when they only had to protect just one section. As another round of balls descended, Gustav leaped upwards from the top of the mast towards the southeast part of the sky. He arched his arm backwards with force and threw it forward as he arrived in front of the ball. Bang! Boom! As the ball exploded after the collision, his body phased through the explosion, traveling further forward. Zwii! This was when he noticed the second ball headed towards the eastern part of the double section he was protecting. Landing on the top of one of the high-rise buildings, Gustav dashed forward with intense speed. Swoosh! The instant he arrived at the edge, he leaped upwards. Thump! His body traveled across the air as he leaped over the streets and landed on the top of the next building. Gustav turned towards the right side and dashed forward before leaping upwards again. His body traveled across the air, flying over about 4 tall buildings before landing in the middle of one of the residential areas. Bam! Due to the height at which he leaped, landing on the ground caused a cloud of dust to scatter across the place. The second ball, which was only about 400 feet in the air at the moment, could be seen up ahead. Gustav leaped upwards again and swung his right leg forward in midair. Bang! The ball was immediately blasted to pieces as he phased through the explosion and landed on the balcony of a 2-story building in front. This wasn't only happening in his area. Other special class cadets were also handling the same issue where they had to deal with 2 balls falling towards their sections simultaneously. A showdown between 2 people is gonna be happening soon. Smiley face. Chapter 481. This wasn't only happening in his area. Other special class cadets were also handling the same issue where they had to deal with two balls falling towards their sections simultaneously. Other special class cadets were also able to handle theirs. In some sections, the second ball fell later than the first. Gustav and only a few special class cadets were exceptions. Dashing through the streets, Gustav arrived back at the middle of both sections he was protecting. Other special class cadets at this point were already on the alert after that happened, so they were ready to destroy more than one in the next round. Back in the facility, the inspectors happened to be speaking to one of the instructors. "How tough are the current balls?" The one with a diamond-shaped head asked. "Currently half the toughness of steel." The instructor answered, Turn it up the notch. I want to see how powerful the attacks of first-year special class can be." Another inspector instructed. Gustav and the others suddenly noticed that in the next round, the toughness of the balls suddenly increased by several levels. Those who were still using less powerful attacks had been taken by surprise and nearly failed to destroy the balls before they landed in their section. Since the toughness increased, they had to attack the same ball more than once due to the attacks. Gustav finally used the atomic disintegration blade, throwing it towards the ball on the other end of the section while destroying the one in front of him. Due to the partially long distance between both balls, the other ball didn't get destroyed in one go after the atomic disintegration blade collided with it. Gustav had to move towards that side as well with speed and destroy it. On Angie's side of the city, it had been relatively easy for her to move around all this time due to her speed. Once again, she dashed up the surface of a high-rise building and jumped towards the side while thrusting her right leg forward. Bang! The massive ball, twice the size of a boulder, was immediately blasted to pieces as she traveled straight to the building on the other side and slammed into the window. Bam! KRRYHH. Shards of glass were sent flying across the place as she landed inside the office building on the 234th floor and rolled on the floor repeatedly before coming to a stop. Standing to her feet, there wasn't a single scratch on her body, but she had prevented both balls from making contact with the part of the city she was supposed to protect. Angie looked around with a slightly disturbed expression on her face before finding her way to the elevator and moving to the top of the building. In other parts of the city, the special class cadets were starting to have a hard time dealing with two balls at once, especially when their toughness had gone up by a lot. It was only a matter of time before the weaker ones got evicted. EE on his side was having a lot of fun bringing the two balls together. He would open up vortexes causing both balls to appear in the same spot far above the sections of the city he was supposed to protect and destroy them both in one fell swoop. Even when the dark balls became tougher to destroy, only a few special class cadets could handle it to this point without breaking a sweat. Elevira, since the start, hadn't even bothered using two hands. She had one hand behind her back all this time, as she moved from place to place across her city while destroying them with a single attack. Eldris hadn't bothered opening his eyes. He could still handle the two balls falling at the same time without using too much power. Chad had two gigantic blood creatures positioned in different parts of the sections he was protecting. They each had massive club-like blood weapons in their hands, which they used in dealing with balls that were headed towards their vicinity. Chad didn't have to put in a lot of work due to this. He just sat down at the top of a building with a bored-looking expression. As expected, after about 5 more rounds, 3 special class cadets failed to stop a ball. The supervisors teleported them back to the facility the instant it made contact with one of the buildings in the city. They had managed to clear about 47 rounds, which was way higher than the highest normal cadet, but they were still embarrassed for being the first to fail. As more rounds passed, more and more special class cadets began to get evicted from the city after failing to stop one of the balls. In the next 20 minutes, only about 15 special class cadets were left. At this point, Gustav was still destroying the balls without any form of transformation, even though they were now tougher than steel. Shroom, shroom, shroom. The next round, the sound from the sky intensified, and the special class cadets that were still left noticed 3 of these massive black balls headed for their sections. The spectators' eyes widened slightly as they also noticed it. Combination has been activated. Sprint plus super jump. Gustav combined these two, and he leaped upwards with full force. Thump. The entire mast vibrated as his body ascended into the sky, and he found himself closing in on the first black ball. Bluish tattoo-like glows began to appear all over Gustav's arm. His muscles bulged intensely while he pulled his arm backwards with force. Throwing his fist forward, a loud sound of collision rang out as it made contact with the ball, causing the bluish energy to gather around it. The ball didn't get destroyed in one hit, but instead of Gustav attacking it again, he somersaulted severally in midair before landing on it and leaping forward towards the direction of the next ball. Thum! The instant his legs separated from the body of the ball, there was a massive explosion. Boom! Bluish energy filled the sky as Gustav's body traveled towards the next ball. Chapter 482. Boom! Bluish energy filled the sky as Gustav's body traveled towards the next ball. Gustav arrived in front of the next ball, which was still over 5,000 feet in the air. Bang! Gustav punched it so hard. It traveled across the air and slammed into the third ball in the distance. Atomic manipulation has been activated. A milky-colored blade of energy was formed in Gustav's hand, which he threw forward with force as he descended from the air. Sweeve! The blade repeatedly spiraled across the air as it found its way to both balls and cleaved them in half accurately after making contact. Boom! An explosion followed afterwards, and Gustav repeatedly spun in the air as he descended to control the direction of his falling body. Bang! He landed on the top of a high-rise building towards the west, causing it to vibrate intensely from the heavy landing. While Gustav was dealing with his 3 balls, the other special classes were also trying their best to destroy all before they landed. Angie swept across another building after destroying the first ball as another horn grew from her forehead, and her speed became so fast only a silver line could be seen. Leaping into the air, Angie did a somersaulting kick as she ascended. Bang! Her leg collided with the ball, sending, stopping its descent in midair and causing it to slightly travel upwards as Angie started descending from the air. Landing on another high-rise building, she dashed forward with immense speed, crossing a distance of 4,000 feet in a single second. Whitish energy began gathering around her as she once again ran up another high-rise building and leaped into the air. She was currently headed for the third ball. As she ascended over 1,000 feet above the skyscraper, Angie released the energy surrounding her. Shroom! Boom! A loud sound of explosion traveled across different sections of the city as the ball was disintegrated completely by the whitish waves of energy. Angie's body descended once again, and she started moving towards the other ball she didn't destroy in one go earlier. She was able to get to it in time and destroy it. On Glade's side, she conjured up hundreds of sickles in midair and flung them outwards. Iti was still having fun bringing all 3 balls together to destroy them in one fell swoop. Even though they were now tougher than earlier since he was able to easily make contact with them, destroying them before they reached his section of the city was very plausible. Eldris finally opened his eyes at this point, and everything around him turned black and white as he traveled towards the second ball. A single touch made the black ball lose its color. The black on the ball was sapped away and covered Eldris' right hand. The instant he punched at the ball, it was blasted to smithereens easily. After doing this, he didn't even need to move to the next one. His beautiful eyes stared in the direction of the next black ball, and then the blackness covering the ball started swirling. Eldris appeared on the ball the next instant as the blackness covering it disappeared, and he destroyed it just like the one before. Dash! Oh my gosh, what is that eye ability? Dash! Eldir's had functioning eyes all these time? Dash! How is he doing all that? The spectators were surprised after seeing Eldris use the power of his eyes for the first time. Elevera, on her end, dashed across the sky like she wasn't affected by gravity as a purplish glow surrounded her palms. A single palm strike sunk into the ball, destroying it from the inside out. She still seemed to have a lot of energy as she moved to the next ball to destroy it as well. Teamy, Matilda, Glade, and 3 more special class cadets failed to stop one of the balls in this round and were teleported back to the facility. At this point, only around 9 special class cadets were left, and these were the most powerful special class cadets among the first years. Vera had been teleported back to the facility about 2 rounds back. He still felt like he had enough energy to spare him for only a few more rounds, although he was quite unbothered. He felt he had already done enough. Dark Falco was also running out of energy, as well as Chutlu. Minutes went by, and Yi finally decided to drop out after feeling his energy nearly running out. He had opened so many vortexes and even controlled the movement of the balls so many times, which caused him to expend a lot of bloodline energy, mostly due to the size of the balls. Destroying the ones in the last one, two were no easy feat due to their toughness. Falco also dropped out at this point with 3 more special classes. At this point, only Elevra, Gustav, Eldris, and Chad were left. Eldris and Chad could continue to destroy as many balls that came in the next round if they didn't run out of energy. Still, Eldris was expending a lot of energy by keeping his eyes open. His eyes were literally distorting the reality around him, and it cost a lot of energy to keep going. If he didn't have an A-grade bloodline, he would have run out of energy by now. Elevra was still hanging on like she wasn't even bothered by the challenge. Chad and Gustav were the only ones making use of brute force alone to destroy the balls. Chad still had it easier because of his blood creatures, but he was still spending a lot of energy. 3 more rounds went by, and none of them had backed out yet. Elevra and Eldris were still destroying the balls in 1 or 2 attacks, while Gustav and Chad still had to attack the balls 2 or more times to completely destroy them. This made it look as if Chad and Gustav would drop out soon, but they still went on for about 5 more rounds. Chapter 483. At the 57th round, where each ball size was almost as large as a bungalow building, Chad and Eldris failed to stop one of the 3 balls after running out of bloodline energy. Chad stared in the direction of Gustav's section, where he could see him soaring in the sky after destroying a ball just before he was teleported away. How is he still destroying them with a casual expression? Chad gritted his teeth in frustration after arriving back in the facility. Eldris closed his eyes back as he took his seat beside E, Falco, Timi, and Rhea. The other cadets in the vicinity, especially the females, stared at him with a fawning expression. Now that they had witnessed his eye abilities, they believed he could still go toe-to-toe with the number 1 and 2. Although it wasn't guaranteed that he would win, they had seen now that his abilities were sophisticated. He was more powerful than they thought. Chad and the others also received stares of adoration, but after hearing the sound of the explosion from the direction of the city, everyone turned to face the holographic monitors again. Now that practically everyone had dropped out of the challenge, only the 2 most powerful first-year cadets were left. Everyone focused on this since they had wanted to know who was more powerful among the 2. They had never had a proper battle with each other, and every fight Gustav had always made them rethink if he was weaker or stronger than Elevra. So those 2 are Gustav and Elevra. I have heard reports of them as well, and their performances are fascinating. No first years, regardless of whether or not they're special class, should be able to come this far, yet they did. I'm interested in seeing how far they can go. At the inspector's corner, the inspectors were intrigued and interested in seeing how far Gustav and Elevra would go. Back in the city, Gustav and Elevra had successfully destroyed the balls again. At this point, they could see each other from the distance as Gustav stood at the top of the mast. She had to use more than 2 attacks to destroy a ball now due to the intense toughness, but she was still fast enough to get to the 3 of them like Gustav. She was 7 sections to the west, but Gustav could see her clearly due to God eyes while seeing his outline at the top of the mast. Her eyes squinted as a smile appeared on her face. It had to be you. Gustav smiled back. Game on. Combination has been activated. His body began to transform as he grew up to 7 feet in height with a large muscular frame and black-colored thick skin. Fangs grew out of his mouth along with horns, and sharp claws protruded from his fingertips. Elevra could feel the immense increase in energy waves from her location as she stared in Gustav's direction on the mast. Then he'll get serious too, Elevra said internally as she pulled the head tie from her head, revealing the closed eye on her forehead. A purplish glow covered her entire frame, causing the vicinity to tremble. She stepped forward after noticing the balls descending from the sky once again. Even the buildings around her trembled due to the forceful twist and turn of the space surrounding her, created by the energy she had just unleashed. Gustav also sensed the increase in energy from his location and nodded. She truly is powerful. But today is the day I take the first spot on the rankings, Gustav said as he leaped upwards with force. Thuum, cracks appeared at the top of the mast as his feet separated from them, causing the entire thing to tremble with force. Gustav raised his leg up as he traveled up like a rocket bang. He destroyed the first ball and repeatedly spiraled in the air, increasing the speed of his descent as he landed on a high-rise building. Scree, opening his mouth, Gustav shot out waves of sonic energy towards the next ball, causing it to halt in the air for a second before completely disintegrating it. At this point, Elevra had also jumped upwards to deal with her balls as well. The spectators watched with widened eyes as Gustav and Elevra displayed a new level of strength, destroying all the balls that came for the next 10 rounds. Everyone was now convinced that no other cadet could come close to their level of strength and energy, considering how they kept making use of powerful attacks. The eye on Elevra's forehead opened up as she stood at the top of a building. Purplish and dark energy gathered around it before it shot out. Sozum. A beam of penetrative energy shot through the clouds, destroying all 3 balls, falling towards her side of the city in one fell swoop. Gustav dealt with his using sonic screams and physical punches, which always destroyed them. He still hadn't made use of some other abilities, but he was okay with these abilities handling the job for now. These two continued with the destruction for another 5 rounds, and even the inspectors couldn't believe their eyes and kept asking if they were truly first years. However, both of them were slowly running out of energy. Even though Elevra was very powerful, she didn't have unlimited energy. The next round arrived, and this time 4 massive dark balls the size of bungalow buildings shot out of the sky. Before Gustav and Elevra could attack, something happened. A force of attraction suddenly pulled the 4 balls together, and the instant they collided, they began to merge. The 4 balls in the sky, both in Gustav's and Elevra's sections, merged, and 2 massive balls were created. One headed for Gustav's section, while the other headed for Elevra's. These balls were the sizes of a small mountain. No one could imagine how tough they'd be. The speed at which they descended, coupled with their sizes, generated a massive amount of wind that Gustav and Elevra felt from their position below. Chapter 484. The speed at which they descended, coupled with their sizes, generated a massive amount of wind that Gustav and Elevra felt from their position below. The spectators were astonished by the size and didn't doubt the amount of force these balls were carrying was humongous. The balls cast a huge shadow across the sections of the city. Gustav's entire frame suddenly combusted and became covered in reddish-brown flames as he leaped upwards. Dash, what? He can use flames too? Dash, is this another ability of one of his transformations? The spectators were wowed by seeing these flames on Gustav's being as he shot upwards towards the massive ball. Elevra slammed one of her legs on the ground and ascended by over 1,000 feet in barely a few moments. Her fists were covered by a purplish glow as she arched her right arm downwards before throwing it up with force. Threa. She and Gustav happened to hit both balls simultaneously, causing a loud sound similar to that of a thunderclap to ring out. The red-hot fire spread from the point of impact where Gustav's punch landed, but the ball was only affected by being pushed upwards by a few feet. It was still sturdy. The same happened with Elevra, but both of them weren't done. They continued ascending in the air and kept throwing out punches upwards at the balls. Bam, 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 bam. Cracks had already spread to different parts of the balls after they punched them several times. However, it was still far from getting destroyed. Gustav was affected by gravity, so he started falling back to the ground in a few, but as he fell, he raised his head upwards and shot out another sonic scream. Scree, the sonic waves rammed into the gigantic ball again, but only held it in place for a few seconds before it started descending again. Over at Elevra's side, she floated in midair as the purplish energy still surrounded her figure and kept striking the massive ball with her palm. She was like an ant in front of the ball, but every one of her strikes made a tremendous impact. After floating for a few more seconds longer than Gustav, her body began to descend, and the dark eye on her forehead once again shot out the purplish and dark beam. Zuzumzum. Bang. Her entire frame was pushed down faster as the beam slammed into the ball and kept ramming at it. From the spectators' angle, they saw Elevra land on a high-rise building and kept firing out the purplish beam. The ball was suspended in the air. Due to the force the beam was emitting and Elevra's body being used as support, cracks began to appear underneath her feet. KRRYHH. The cracks spread to every part of the massive rooftop and continued to worsen as she kept it up. However, before the top of the high-rise building could give way, more cracks appeared on the massive ball, casting its looming shadow above the city. KRRYHH. Boom. A loud explosion followed afterwards that sent shockwaves all across the place. Forwa. Elevra slid back a little due to the immense force of the wind generated after the explosion in the sky. Meanwhile, on Gustav's side, his arm grew to the size of 10 feet, became extremely muscular and massive as his body shot upwards once more. His head transformed into that of the serpentine mixed breed as he shot out greenish energy towards the ball and swung out his massive hand towards it as well. Bang! Bang! The cracks increased as the greenish energy slammed into it. Still, it didn't get destroyed yet until Gustav's massive right hand made contact. Bang! His hand shot straight through its toughness, causing chunks to fall out just before. Boom! It exploded into smithereens. Both of them had managed to deal with this, which had shocked the spectators a lot because they thought this was the end for them both after seeing the size of the balls. Just when everyone thought this was where the challenge would end, 2 more balls that happened to be the same size as the ones they had destroyed appeared once more. Elevra felt like she hadn't even had time to catch her breath, and they were sending out another one. I should still have enough energy to destroy this one. They'll do it fast, she said internally before leaping upwards once more. Gustav also noticed this and was about to leap upwards as well to handle it when he sensed something. Phew! Another ball suddenly appeared above his, crashing down with more speed than the first one. Elevra, who was close to the first ball, suddenly noticed this as well, but before she could react, both balls collided and started moving downwards with even more intensity than before. Bang! Elevra was crashed into in the next moment as both balls pushed her downwards while descending. Gasp! The spectators could see her body glued to the bottom of the first ball as the second ball stacked on it, and both descended with immense force. It looked as if she had passed out. Meanwhile, on Gustav's end, he checked out his remaining energy points. Energy, 7,000/15,000. I should spend at least 3,000 energy points if I try this, Gustav thought as he activated size manipulation. Size manipulation has been activated. Gustav leaped downwards towards the street as his entire frame started increasing in size. At first, the spectators watching were wondering what he was up to, but in the next moment, looks of astonishment were written all over their faces. Gustav grew past the height of 500 feet and kept growing. In a few moments, he was taller than 1,000 and kept growing bigger. 300 EP, 300 EP, 300 EP, 300 EP. He kept getting system notifications about his depleting energy points as he kept growing taller, but he wasn't done yet. The residential buildings in the sections continued to get smaller in his point of view as the skyscrapers in the vicinity didn't look so big anymore. Chapter 485. He stopped after reaching a height close to 3,000 feet. At this point, up to 4,000 energy points had been spent, but Gustav didn't feel any regrets because this was like an experiment for him. Although, he knew he couldn't maintain this form for too long, or he'd be out of energy in no time. The spectators were astonished as they saw the massiveness. He was taller than all the buildings in the vicinity currently, and his dark, beast-like combination transformation was still on. Gustav raised his hands up as both balls kept descending like he wanted to catch them. The instant they reached his hands, he grabbed hold of them tightly. Boom! A loud sound rang out as his massive feet sunk into the ground, creating a small pit due to the size and force of trying to stop both balls. Gustav groaned intensely as his arms lowered and his muscles budged from the heavily. The balls were still pushing him down, but he groaned out as he stood in place. After a few seconds, he was able to stop both balls and separate them before holding one in his hands each. Meanwhile, on Elevra's side, she had finally opened her eyes. She shot out the most penetrative and most powerful beam since the start. The balls were still falling, but were taking damage as they descended with her. At this point, They were only about 2,000 feet from the ground and still falling with immense speed, so it was only a matter of seconds before they collided with her sections of the city. Elevra continued to attack with force, but even with everything, the balls still didn't stop moving, although they had slowed down a little. As they approached one of the high-rise buildings, Elevra finally decided to use one of her most powerful attacks. Thwimim, Thuwin, a projection of another purplish eye appeared just right above the ball on top. It was very massive, almost half the size of the humongous mountain-sized ball. Zuhom, both the eyes on Elevra's forehead, and the projected one shot out massive pillar-sized purplish beams simultaneously, one from above and the other from below. At this point, they were close to slamming into the building when both balls finally exploded. Boom, boom. The shockwaves slammed into Elevra, sending her crashing straight through the building. Bang, bang. She came out the other side and slammed into the next building hundreds of feet away. At this point, Gustav had already caught both balls falling towards his side and was holding them up and repeatedly slamming them into each other. Bang, 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 bang. With every collision, the vicinity would vibrate, and cracks had already appeared on different parts of the road underneath Gustav's feet. Just when the balls were starting to crack apart, two massive balls shot out of the sky again. One towards Gustav's section and the other towards Elevra's. These ones were faster than the previous ones. Elevra, who had just stopped the two earlier, was still lodged into a building on the west, trying to get herself out. Gustav smashed both balls together again, trying to destroy them before the third one could arrive. But then it was too fast. By the time it reached his section, Gustav had raised his leg and swung it upwards like a football player. Bang! He kicked the ball straight back up into the sky and finally smashed the two balls in his possession together, causing them to explode. Each ball was still the size of a mountain, so the spectators were shocked that he could kick one of them back to the sky. Energy, 1200/15000. Seeing as he had lost nearly all his energy, Gustav deactivated size manipulation and returned back to his original size. He decided to deal with the last one that way. Meanwhile, on Elevra's side, she had only noticed the massive ball headed towards her section when it was too late. She was unable to stop it before it slammed into a part of the city. Zing! Elevra was immediately teleported back to the facility before the whole city got decimated. Gustav was now the last special class cadet, standing after passing through a number of 78 rounds. The spectators watched him destroy the third massive ball after a few minutes. When Elevra arrived back, the spectating cadets had looks of awe on their faces as they stared at her. Elevra lost? Doesn't this make Gustav the most powerful? Oh my, Gustav is still going, chatter. 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 Discussions broke out as everyone couldn't stop talking about what had just happened. Elevra had several injuries, but they weren't serious, so she took a simple recovery pill to heal. She was unbothered by the voices of the cadets in the background. Instead, she had a smile on her face. That was really interesting, Gustav. I accept defeat this time, she said internally as she stared at the holographic monitor where Gustav could be seen standing on the tall mast again. Eldris and the rest had looks of excitement on their faces as they stared at each other and fist-bumped before looking back at the holographic monitor. Good job, man, muttered underneath his breath. At this point, everyone thought the challenge would end, but to their surprise, they suddenly saw the clouds split open again. Zrua! 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 This time 4 of these balls started falling from the sky in a lined-up format. The spectators' eyes widened as they saw this. He's definitely losing this round. That's too much. Destroying 2 was a hassle. Talk more of 4. Gustav stared at the 4 massive mountain-sized balls lined up on each other, descending with immense force. His dirty blonde hair started swimming in the wind as his uniform made flapping sounds. Well, I've been wanting to try this. Let's see how much destruction you can cause, Gustav said as he activated gravitational energy container bloodline. The gravitational force around him began to twist and turn at this point, giving the atmosphere a weird vibe. Don't tell me you're going to use it, the system voiced out internally. This is an experiment. I'm going to use this to find out how destructive it is, Gustav responded as a head-sized orb appeared in front of him. Chapter 486. This is an experiment. I'm going to use this to find out how destructive it is, Gustav responded as a head-sized orb appeared in front of him. It was reddish-black in color with purplish electric snakes swimming around it. It was oozing with so much energy that a certain kind of pressure was released into the air. Luckily, no one was in the vicinity to sense it. From the holographic monitors, the spectators stared at the orb floating in front of Gustav with a look of curiosity. They wondered what it was since they had never seen it before, but Endrik recognized this orb shape from his last fight with Gustav in the neighborhood. Why is the color different? He wondered since it was bluish in color back then. Gustav raised his right hand, causing the orb to float above it. Are you sure? You know, doing this is practically revealing that your strength compared to that of your peers is several levels higher. The system voiced out. I know. It's all right. I'm the first cadet to be an officer before even starting training. This will make the higher-ups think twice before doing anything stupid against me in the future. It will definitely raise my value, and they won't want to lose me. It's all part of the plan, Gustav explained as he looked upwards with a serious expression. He descended a little bit before leaping into the air with the orb in his grasp. Everyone's eyes remained on him as he ascended upwards, cutting through the sky. As Gustav closed in on the lineup of massive mountain-sized balls, he arched his arm back intensely. Fwoo! He threw his hand forward with force just when he was about 50 feet away from the collision. The orb flew upwards further as it still cackled with purplish electric arcs. At this point, Gustav's ascent was reaching its limit as his body started coming to a stop in midair. The moment his body paused and was about to start descending, the orb arrived in front of the first ball. Shishaihayan. The moment contact was made, a bright, dark reddish light enveloped a radius of more than 3,000 feet in midair, and what came next was an ear-piercing explosion. Boom! Ripple of destructive waves spread from the point of impact, obliterating all physical objects it made contact with in the process. Bang! Gustav, whose body was descending, was hit by the shock waves and sent tumbling down faster. Gustav coughed out blood after the shock waves hit him as he felt his head ringing from the collision. How is it so powerful? Gustav said internally with a shocked expression as his body shot down from the air with speed. The first ball was completely obliterated as the ripple of destructive waves spread across the sky and kept spreading towards the rest. To the spectators' awe, it completely consumed the next ball, obliterating it as well and kept spreading. At this point, the sky was covered by the reddish ripple of destructive waves that kept increasing in size. The shock waves caused Gustav to slam into one of the buildings, and his body kept flying through several walls, breaking them in the process before flying out of the back of the building. As his body kept traveling backwards and downwards due to the impact, Gustav was about to slam into another building when he suddenly spun in the air, regaining his balance. Zoom! He did a flip when he was close to colliding with the window of the next skyscraper and landed both his feet on them, controlling the force before pushing himself forward. Fwaya! He somersaulted forward in midair and spiraled towards the street in the middle. Bang! In a few seconds, he landed on the ground in a crouching format as a cloud of dust spread around him. Boom! 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 The shock waves from the orb's energy slammed into several buildings in the vicinity, causing windows to blast apart, raining glass upon the streets. After completely consuming all 3 mountain-sized balls in the sky, the ripple suddenly stopped spreading and started shrinking. Gustav stabilized himself after landing on the ground and stared at the sky. The ripples of destruction suddenly shrank completely and disappeared into a blue after consuming all 3 balls. Only one was left at this point. Gustav cleaned the blood from the side of his mouth before leaping upwards once again to destroy the last ball. Back in the facility, the entire hall had turned quiet. The cadets, instructors, and inspectors all had awe-stricken looks and couldn't wrap their heads around how a first year was supposed to have enough power to do that. From what they had just witnessed, Gustav had enough power to destroy a section of the city with the attack he had just made use of. Everyone had thought he wouldn't be able to pull it off, but he did with more ease than he had been doing before, destroying 3 balls in one go. Isn't he supposed to be a marshal ranked? That level of destruction? It is very close to Echo rank powerhouse if not on par. And he's not even a second-year cadet yet. We have this footage sent to Great Commander Cheyenne. The inspectors couldn't believe their eyes and decided to send the footage of the last 1 minute in particular to Great Commander Cheyenne. After destroying the last ball, Gustav once again descended downwards and landed at the top of a 400-story tall skyscraper. He still felt pain in his body from the earlier collision of the shockwaves, but he was starting to feel better compared to before. I could harm myself with that. I have to be careful, Gustav thought with a look of reflection. His body defense was very high, yet the collision still affected him that much. He could already imagine just how much a normal cadet would be affected if the ripple of destructive waves hit them. Chapter 487. You were right. I should only use this on an opponent I'm sure is more powerful than I am. Also, it certainly shouldn't be used in cities or neighborhood to avoid casualties since it covers a wide range, Gustav said internally. Well, I told you, didn't I? The system responded with a slightly frustrated tone. I also need to be very far from its range, Gustav added after recalling he was nearly obliterated as well just now. Now he felt he should only resort to using this in emergency situations. Just what was that, and how is he able to cause such destruction? It must have been a sure finishing attack move. I'm sure he can only use such an attack once. Yeah, that definitely is a sure finishing attack move, but way too powerful. Here we were thinking he wasn't that much stronger than Elevera. The cadets began discussing and arguing about Gustav's last move. Most of them felt he would only be able to use an attack of such power only once. If only they knew that Gustav had over 200 of these orbs hidden away in his invisible gravitational field. After a few seconds, Gustav was teleported back to the facility. There was no way the challenge would be continued since its difficulty was already bordering on the level of senior cadets. Everyone stared at him like he was a god after his arrival. Some of them wondered if they were even peers. They would occasionally stare at Endrik as well, who was sitting somewhere behind. Endrik had managed to be among the top 12 special class cadets, and he was only 12. Everyone here was at least 5 years older than Endrik, yet his strength level was frightening at such a young age. They realized that both brothers would definitely grow to become top powerhouses in the MBO when the time came. One of the instructors came forward to say a few things as the scores and improvement rate of the cadets were displayed in descending order. 1. Gustav Crimson, 1,300%, 960 points. 2. Elevera Thorn, 1,100%, 780 points. 3. Eldris Curtis, 900%, 520 points. The list continued on like that, and only about 2 normal cadets happened to be high on the list. Ria was one of them with a score of 400. Most of the special class cadets' improvement rate was not too distant from each other. Gustav's, of course, was still the highest. The updated first-year ranking was displayed by the side, and now Gustav was number 1 on that as well. Gustav's name wasn't the only one that moved up. Angie, Glade, Endrik, and Matilda also had an increase in their ranks. Even though Elevera had dropped to number 2, it was without a doubt that she was still a formidable opponent with what she had displayed. Anyone would immediately cross challenging her off their minds. However, Gustav's strength was just out of everyone's league right now that a lot of them felt being in his presence was illegal. Elevera now realized that she was right all along. Gustav had truly been hiding his strength. After the event ended, the inspectors asked Gustav to wait behind for a brief meeting with them and the instructors. He did as he was told and waited behind as the other cadets left. The inspectors addressed themselves first, commending them on their work so far, and passed across a few instructions from Great Commander Cheyenne. Gustav was here the whole time they discussed things that shouldn't be heard by cadets, but no one dared to tell him off since the inspectors had asked him to wait behind. After the brief meeting was concluded, the 3 inspectors pulled Gustav to a corner for a brief, private discussion. Gustav, as I'm sure you are aware, you will be undergoing your first mission few weeks from now, Inspector Ryan voiced out. Yes, Gustav responded. Initially, we were supposed to give you a 3-day test before sending you out on the field, but now we've changed our minds, Inspector Darby, the only female among the trio, added. Oh, I see, Gustav responded with an unbothered tone. Your detachable MBO officer badge is ready. We can't tell if you will be sent on an undercover mission or a battle mission yet, or maybe a mixture of both, but you will be informed of everything a few days prior, Inspector Ryan stated. All right. Anything else? Gustav asked. Yes, we have been informed about the death battle issued with your little bro. Before the inspector could complete his statement, Gustav interrupted. I don't have a brother. You must be mistaken, he voiced out. It clearly states that you two are biologically related from the reports, Inspector Darby said with a tone of confusion. With all due respect, inspectors, learn to make proper research before making statements. I do not have a brother, Gustav stated. All three inspectors stared at each other in confusion for an instant before resuming turning to face Gustav again. If that is so, then, our apologies. But I'm sure you know who we are referring to, Inspector Ryan said with a mild tone. Skipped my mind. Whoever I challenge is already gone, Gustav said with a casual tone. Ahem, it's Indrik Oslov, Inspector Orion stated. So, what about him? Gustav asked. We want you to cancel your request for a death match with him, the inspector added. Gustav stared at him for a few seconds with a straight expression. No. His tone of decline was so strong and powerful that even the inspectors were a little taken aback. They were inspectors, so everyone fawned on them. This was the first time they were receiving such rejection, and from a cadet nevertheless. We do not wish to lose any one of you two to such a battle. We believe you both can come to an agreement, find a common ground. Before the inspector could complete his statement, he was once again interrupted by Gustav. No. There is no common ground. The only agreement I want is his to the death match. Gustav remained unflinching as he voiced out. Chapter 488. No. There is no common ground. The only agreement I want is a death match. Gustav remained unflinching as he voiced out. The inspectors were once again taken aback for a few moments. Great Commander Cheyenne has asked us to relay to you that you can request for whatever you want so long as you cancel the request, Inspector Derby added. As tempting as that is, my answer still remains no, Gustav said once again. The three inspectors were speechless at his hard-headedness on this matter. Seeing his stance, they believed they wouldn't be able to do anything to convince him otherwise, so they decided they would relay this message to Great Commander Cheyenne. The inspectors released Gustav after a few minutes of mentioning some necessary things for his mission. Gustav headed back to his room after all was said and done. He wasn't backing down on the death battle. So long as Indrik accepted it, the match would hold as planned. Within his room, Indrik held onto a small white box that he just got delivered to him a while back. He had a slightly curious look on his face as he opened it to check the contents of the box. Within the box was a small round black device. The instant Indrik tapped on the button, he noticed a holographic message was projected from the device along with the voice of an AI who read out the contents of the message. Gustav Crimson has issued a death match. Recipient: Indrik Oslov. Venue: Hall of Doom. Date: August 17th. Do you wish to accept? Yes/no. Indrik stared at the piece of information in front of him with a conflicted expression after the AI finished voicing them out. He wants us to battle to the death. Indrik opened his mouth, but couldn't express his words. Instructions unclear. Do you wish to accept this match? Yes/no, the AI voiced out again. Indrik's hands moved in a fidgety manner as he tried saying something but still couldn't find the words. Recalling young Joss' commands was messing with his head, so he couldn't think straight. Instructions unclear. Do you wish to? Before the AI could complete its sentence, Indrik tapped the power button, switching it off. Huff, huff, huff. He started breathing in and out profusely as he dropped the device back in the box and closed it up. He took it to a corner of his room and dropped it there. What do I do? Indrik wondered with a confused expression as he moved towards his bed area. Gustav arrived back in his room later and went back to channeling his bloodline. It had been a very hectic day. His energy was almost completely depleted. Although he still had energy from many other bloodlines, making use of skills and abilities from the system always took a lot of energy points, especially when he made use of the combination to use more than one ability at a time. At this time, the whole MBO camp was in an uproar about the events that took place today. The first years began to compare Gustav to the seniors, and rumors even started flying around of how Gustav was on their strength level. Even after a few days passed, the hype of the challenging event that took place still hadn't died down. In the last few days, Gustav had been approached by several senior cadets with nefarious intentions. Some of them didn't like the fact that Gustav's strength was being compared to theirs. They found it insulting that a first year that had only been here for about 6 months would be compared to those who have been here for about 2 years. Since bullying wasn't allowed in the MBO, and it was literally impossible for the seniors to find a loophole in bullying Gustav since he was an officer, they decided to challenge him to duels instead. Gustav had received several duel challenges, but kept turning them down. He wasn't interested in fighting any one of these seniors. At least not now. With the ruckus he caused by exposing so many abilities the other day, he wanted things to die down. So he had decided he wasn't accepting any battles with seniors till he was back from his first mission. No one knew how long that was going to take since missions sometimes extended longer than initial estimations due to unforeseen circumstances. Gustav could only focus on continuous training for now. A few more days went by, and Gustav noticed that he hadn't gotten feedback on the deathmatch he issued for himself and Endrik. He decided to visit the challenge hall on this day. Arriving there, he met the officers at the counter and inquired about the deathmatch he issued. One of the officers on the counter proceeded to check on the information regarding the deathmatch just as requested. According to our data here, there has been no response from the recipient of the issued challenge, the officer stated while checking the holographic monitor in front of him and clacking on the keyboard to confirm. What? No response from Endrik? Gustav questioned with a slightly confused expression. Yes. The recipient has neither accepted nor declined the request, the officer at the counter responded. Gustav was speechless for a bit. After standing there for a few moments, he made his way out of the challenge hall. This had him confused, and he kept wondering why Endrik hadn't responded to the challenge yet. A lot of thoughts came to his mind as he headed back to his room. Upon arriving at the residence, Gustav headed straight for Endrik's room. He already knew the number beforehand, which happened to be located at the end of the corridor. Gustav arrived in front of Endrik's room door in a minute and proceeded to knock. He wanted to make sure Endrik had received the challenge request because he saw no sense in not responding to it. Gustav felt it would have made more sense if he had declined rather than not making any decision he saw as suspicious, especially after the inspectors requested for him to cancel it the other day. Calm, 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 calm. After knocking for several minutes, there was still no answer. Gustav allowed his perception phase through the wall and scope around the inside of the room. Oh, it's empty, Gustav muttered as he stopped knocking and turned around to leave. Endrik happened not to be within the room at this time. Within the space simulation training room, Endrik stood in front of Officer Mag with a conflicted expression as a dialogue ensued between them. So what exactly do you want to do? Officer Mag asked. I don't know. Endrik stammered as he answered. Hey kid, look at me. Officer Mag called out to him. Endrik did as she had said. Do you want to battle your big brother to the death? Officer Mag stared into his eyes and asked, Tell me the truth. Do you still hold so much grudge against him that you feel can only be settled by the death of one of you two? She asked once again. I don't. Not anymore, Endrik answered. There's your answer. Decline the request and talk to Gustav, Officer Mag answered. But this is what he wants. He wants to kill me with his own hands, Endrik voiced out. And it's all my fault, he added. I didn't say it wasn't. That's why I said you should go and talk to him, Officer Mag persuaded. Endrik sighed as his face straightened up with a look of determination. I will. Thank you, Endrik voiced out before turning around to leave. I don't care about your order, Hung Jo. I don't care that you want to fight me to the death, big brother. I will not accept this, he decided internally. Endrik walked back to his apartment with newfound zeal and decided he would speak to Gustav tomorrow after their morning routine since it was late already. The next morning arrived, and as usual, the cadets went out for their morning routine. The instant the morning routine ended, Endrik decided to look for Gustav, but before he could, he noticed Gustav headed in his direction. Gustav arrived in front of Endrik amidst the crowd of many other cadets. Why haven't you accepted it? Gustav asked with a powerful tone. Indrik immediately understood what he was referring to. Can we go somewhere to talk? Indrik asked politely. I have nothing to say to you. Accept the request and let our fists do the talking on the set day, Gustav voiced out with an aloof tone before turning around to leave. No. Indrik suddenly voiced out, causing Gustav to pause his footsteps. At this point, the cadets who were initially leaving after the morning routine stopped to see the ongoing drama. Gustav slowly turned around while asking, What did you say? I said no. I will not accept the death battle request, Indrik voiced out with a strong tone. Chapter 489. Gustav's forehead creased as his eyes dimmed while staring at Indrik with a suspicious look. What do you mean by you will not accept? Gustav voiced out with a cold tone. Exactly what I mean. I do not accept to having this death match with you, Indrik responded. The cadets in the vicinity all had shocked looks on their faces at this point in time. Hearing that Gustav had issued a death match with Indrik caused a commotion amongst them. Deathmatches were hardly issued the MBO, and this was the first time they heard of one since they arrived here. Not only was it among first years, but it was also between brothers. Is this a joke? Gustav asked with a cold tone. No. I do not wish to battle to the death with you. No, I do not wish to battle with you at all, Indrik responded while walking forward to stand in front of Gustav. What are you playing at now? This another ploy of yours? Gustav asked while raising one eyebrow up while staring down at Indrik. No, I just want us to stop this pointless enmity and grudge. Please can we go somewhere to talk? Indrik requested politely again. Gustav paused for a bit and kept staring at Indrik with a look of scrutiny. After a few seconds of intense gazing from both parties, Gustav leaned towards Indrik's left ear. You don't fool me, he slowly whispered into Indrik's ear. I know you're a part of that group because I made sure every single one of them were caught except for you. As these words drifted into Indrik's ear, his eyes widened. He knows? If you don't want to be exposed, you'll do well and accept the death match, Gustav added before raising his head back and turning around to leave with a smirk on his face. The cadets witnessing the dialogue between them had looks of curiosity as they noticed the expression on Indrik's face after Gustav turned around to leave. What did he say to him? This question was dominant in most of their minds. Indrik stood in place for a long time with a conflicted look on his face before leaving. He recalled along the way that Officer Mag was the one who was responsible for the case about the group of cadets secretly under young Joe. He couldn't imagine how she'd feel if she found out he was amongst the group. This left Indrik with a bad taste in his mouth. On the bright side, he was glad that even with all the investigations, the officers had not been able to figure anything out with the cadets, which meant nothing could lead back to him right now. He was supposed to be their leader because, according to young Joe, they were the disposable pawns that he had inputted to help Indrik rise in the future. Indrik was so shocked that Gustav was the one behind them getting caught. At the moment, young Joe had asked Indrik to lay low with any suspicious activity due to the officers catching on, which meant it would be dangerous for him if he was found to be a part of the group. The troubled Indrik walked back to his room with an expression of contemplation and conflict on. This was puzzling for him, and he knew Gustav wouldn't listen to a word he wanted to say, so he had no idea the steps to take at this point. He arrived back in his room and moved towards the box by the side. Picking up the device, he tapped on the button. Do you wish to accept this challenge? Yes/no. The voice of the AI rang out again. Indrik froze in place again, not knowing the decision to make. What did you say to him? He asked Gustav with a curious expression as they sat in his living room. Some encouraging words to help him in making a decision faster, Gustav responded with an unbothered expression. That's quite vague, Eldris voiced out from the side. Well, it's Gustav. Of course he won't give a clear answer. Falco shook his head as he voiced out. I don't know. Something kind of feels off with the kid. I ain't trying to dispute you two enmity or anything. But did you notice he doesn't get in trouble lately? He said with a contemplative expression. It's just an act. He's always up to no good, but it'll end him once and for all this time. Gustav responded with an emotionless tone. The place turned silent for a bit as no one wanted to really say something perceived as wrong by Gustav since this was a sensitive topic. I haven't experienced what you have gone through. Neither can I say I totally understand how it felt, but that kid is still your brother. I can't imagine killing my own brother, Timmy voiced out from the side. Brother? What big insinuation? Gustav said with a scoff. He's still your blood, though. It seems kind of. Before Timmy could complete his sentence, Gustav cut him short. Stop spouting crap, Timmy. Just like you have said you don't understand because you never experienced it. Leave it as it is. Nothing you say is going to change my decision, Gustav stated with an unflinching look like always. Let's all calm down now. Butted in to reduce the tension. I think what Timmy is trying to say is, just think about the whole situation from every angle before standing on your decision. It's all right if you decide not to change your mind. Just be 100% sure about it, and think the aftermaths, explained. Sure, Gustav replied half-fastly, causing everyone to go quiet again. The next morning arrived quickly, and presently, it was around 4 in the morning. Bed creaking sounds could be heard within Angie's room as she moved from side to side across the bed with a sweat-soaked face. She suddenly opened her eyes and sprang up with a scared look. Chapter 490. Huff, 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 huff. Her chest heaved up and down heavily as she breathed in and out. Another nightmare. Gustav. As these thoughts floated into her head, she suddenly felt immense pain in her thighs. HNGH. Angie groaned in pain as she pulled the blanket to the side to look at her thighs. The outline of black veins could be seen on both her thighs. She kept seething in pain for the next few seconds as the lines grew longer like tree roots from her thighs to her knee area. Suddenly the pain stopped, and the black veins suddenly disappeared. This? Again? Angie muttered with a look of confusion and relief mixed together. The last time this happened, she threw it off as nothing, thinking it was a one-time thing, and now it was happening again. This time it even felt more painful than before. Angie decided that she would visit the medical checkup center today to make sure she was okay. She felt it might be a reaction to maybe something she ate, but she wasn't too bothered because she was sure she would be okay the moment the medical practitioners figured out what the issue was. Putting this aside, she found out that she was still worried about her nightmare. I feel like something is off. I need to speak to Gustav again. I can't shake off this weird feeling, Angie muttered underneath her breath as she stood to her feet. She couldn't stop thinking about her most recent nightmare, which was similar to her last nightmare as well. She went on an early morning jog to clear her head. Angie's current speed was so fast that she ran around the entire camp 1,100 times in less than 2 hours. Currently, across the camp, she was labeled as one of the most difficult special class cadets to defeat because even though she was weaker than most physically, she could only be beaten if an attack made contact. Her speed couldn't be followed, so hitting her was close to impossible, if not impossible, for most cadets. Only cadets with high perceptive abilities similar to Gustav's would react to her speed and maybe time their attacks in correlation with it. However, it would still be very difficult to hit her. After her morning jog, she joined the cadets for the morning routine as well as Gustav and the rest. Gustav minded his business as usual as he ran forward through the first forest. At this point, he was no longer dilly-dallying behind, since he practically knew how to figure out places with traps before he arrived there. It was now way easier than in the beginning. Cadets would occasionally try to meet up with him and share conversations since this was the only way most of them could meet him. Normal cadets were not allowed to visit the dragon residence. Gustav wouldn't even give anyone the chance to come close to him on normal days. However, Gustav would still ignore all of them and continue running forward. He had received too many love letters this period, especially from girls saying they wanted him to have S*X with him. Gustav once again sighed as he dodged another crazy cadet. What can a guy do to avoid all this unwanted attention? Another one wants sex, Gustav complained internally. Maybe you should just give in. You might need the experience. The system chuckled as it butted in. No, I certainly do not, Gustav retorted with a tone of annoyance internally. Oh, you don't want them to know of your inexperience? Little Gustav is afraid of showing his disability to perform procreation activities properly. I see. The system voiced out internally with a burst of laughter. You little. Gustav's forehead creased as he was about to curse. Gustav. He suddenly heard someone call out to him from the side. He would have thought it was another weird cadet, coming to ask for S*X again if he didn't recognize the voice to be Angie's. Angie? Gustav voiced out as he turned to the side. Can I see you later? After the morning routine, Angie asked with a serious expression. Why? Gustav asked while raising one eyebrow. You should say yes. This might finally be your chance to get disvirgined. The system suddenly butted in within his mind. Shut the fuck. Before Gustav could complete his sentence internally, Angie responded. I need to talk to you about something important. Please, she pleaded. Gustav stared at her for a few seconds before responding. All right. Just as he said this, they arrived in front of the tall mountain and began climbing. They'll race you back to the field, Angie suddenly voiced out with a delighted look as she climbed up fast. You and I both know you'll lose, Gustav voiced out as he also climbed up. Oh, is that so? Hee, we shall see. Angie suddenly increased her climbing speed, going ahead of Gustav. This is pretty pointless, but... Okay, challenge accepted, Gustav responded before also starting to climb upwards with speed. At first, he wasn't taking it very seriously and didn't climb up with his full speed, but he noticed that Angie was getting faster and faster. Gustav started taking it seriously and climbed fast as well. Whenever he closed the gap between them and started climbing faster than Angie, the moment he noticed her, she would increase her speed again. This was surprising to Gustav because he knew Angie didn't have this kind of stamina with their sealed bloodlines. Angie was also surprised with herself. She didn't understand why, but she was filled with so much adrenaline at the moment. Her determination to perform better than Gustav today was at its highest. About an hour later, Gustav stood at the starting point with a look of gratification. Angie was currently lying on the ground, breathing in and out profusely. I told you it was pointless. But good job, you did pretty well, Gustav commended with a smile. Chapter 491. It was inty pointless. Old have won. Angie was out of breath, and her sentence kept breaking due to that. Elevra arrived before you did as well, Gustav said while gesturing at Elevra, who was standing a few feet away. Don't be too hard on her, Gustav, Elevra voiced out from behind. Ugh, Angie groaned with a defeated expression as she sat up while pouting her lips. At this point, other cadets began to arrive as well. Gustav and Angie wanted to move to a secluded location to go discuss, but Gustav remembered what had happened with Vera the other time and decided to change his mind. A male cadet wasn't allowed to visit a female residence unless the female cadet gave him a permission slip and vice versa. However, even with that, the other party couldn't stay for too long, but Gustav was sure they would have enough time to discuss since he wasn't interested in having Angie stay at his place for too long anyway. Gustav brought Angie over to his place, and they both sat in the living room while exchanging gazes. Angie was feeling extremely nervous at the moment. It wasn't the first time she was staying in a room with Gustav alone, but she couldn't handle his eyes staring straight into hers without breaking contact. What did you want to talk about? Gustav finally asked after getting tired of seeing Angie silent. Angie was brought out of her reverie, and a tinge of red appeared on her face as she turned to the side. Gustav, I have been having some nightmares lately, Angie voiced out with a low tone. If you're having nightmares, take sleeping pills, they'll help keep your mental state calm, Gustav advised while raising one eyebrow. He wondered if this was what was so important. As a daughter of two scientists, Gustav was sure Angie should know what to do about nightmares better than a lot of people. It's not a normal nightmare, Angie muttered. What do you mean? Gustav asked while squinting his eyes. You are always present in my nightmares. Well, not just you. You and Indrik, Angie explained. And what has that got to do with anything? Gustav questioned. In my nightmares, you two battle and Indrik ends up killing you, Angie revealed. There was silence between them for a few seconds as Angie stared at Gustav with a worried expression. It's just a dream. Get over it, Gustav stated with an unbothered expression. No, I don't think so. I have this feeling, this very bad feeling nagging inside of me. Like something terrible is going to happen if you have that death match with Indrik, Angie explained. Stop being delusional, Angie. He can't win against me. It's going to be his fall, the moment he steps into the Hall of Doom with me, Gustav said with a confident tone. Gustav, I don't know how to explain this to you. I never have nightmares. I've only had a nightmare once before I knew about your death match, and that was when I was still a kid. And something similar to what I had a nightmare about manifested itself in reality, Angie said with a scared tone. Please cancel the death match, Angie pleaded. Gustav stared at her once again for a few seconds before replying, I can't do that. No, I actually can, but I want. This step is essential. If you hadn't stopped me from killing him the last time, we wouldn't be having this conversation, Gustav added. But Angie was short of words. She didn't know how to respond to that and realized that her decision on that day actually led to the current predicament. There's nothing to worry about anyways. Stop being delusional, Gustav stated while leaning against his sofa. Angie knew Gustav well enough to understand that at this point, nothing could change his mind. Even if the most influential person on Earth, or someone with a lot of prestige, came to request for the battle to be cancelled, Gustav would still ignore this person. She could only hope now that things went well, but then an idea came to her head. If the other party doesn't accept, no deathmatch will hold. From the rumors, Indrik isn't on board and even argued with Gustav the other day about accepting. I just need to talk to Indrik and make sure he doesn't accept. These were Angie's thoughts as she stood to her feet. All right, I'll see you later, Angie said as she moved towards the entrance along with Gustav. You probably won't, Gustav responded as he walked her to the door. Angie arrived outside the door, and just as she took one step forward, she paused. Gustav was about to close his door, but he paused when he noticed she stopped walking forward. Angie suddenly turned around with speed and hugged Gustav before planting a kiss on his left cheek. It was so fast that Gustav couldn't react in time. Before he knew it, she had already turned back around and dashed out of the corridor with immense speed. Swoosh, stay safe. These words drifted into his ears along with the whooshing sound due to Angie's speed. Gustav slowly raised his right hand and placed it on the left side of his cheek, rubbing it subconsciously. That was quite sneaky of her, he muttered before turning around to move back into his apartment. Later that evening, Gustav and Vera also met up in his room. Have you managed to complete the process? Gustav asked her. Yes. My parasitic strains are fully developed now. I can take control of him whenever you want me to, Vera responded. Good, Gustav said with a satisfied look. You are going to battle to the death with him. But everyone knows you're powerful than him, so Vera does not understand why he needs to be controlled, Vera stated with a confused tone. Initially, I wanted to control and use him, but now I feel it would be better if he was disposed of. The reason I asked you to continue working the parasitic strain is to make sure the match is accepted. Now that he can be controlled, I want you to activate the strain and make him accept the death match, Gustav instructed. Chapter 492. Oh, Vera now had a look of understanding on her face. Right now, the news about the deathmatch between Gustav and Indrik had spread all across the camp, as well as Indrik's stance on rejecting the request. Many cadets felt this might have to do with the fact that Gustav was currently the most powerful first-year cadet, and going against him was literally begging for defeat. Seeing as it was a deathmatch, they felt Indrik was scared of battling with him. A lot of them had noticed Indrik's shift in personality recently, and even attributed it to this, thinking Indrik was only pretending to be a good boy now till when the storm passed. All right, Vera nodded as she responded to Gustav's demand and closed her eyes. Time passed, and Gustav could see Vera's eyelid twitching occasionally. After a few more seconds, she opened it, and a confused expression could be seen written all over her face. I am getting an interference from an unknown and hidden force within him, Vera stated. This force is clashing with my strains. It's almost like it has. Vera had a look of confusion and disbelief on her face as she paused her sentence. Like it has what? Gustav's eyes squinted as he questioned. Like it has the same function with my parasitic strains. It's fighting for supremacy over control of Indrik, Vera responded. Just as I thought. Gustav did not seem to have a confused expression on his face. Vera's response to him was not shocking because he already knew that something was within Indrik. Same function EY? This revelation had Gustav thinking. It was certainly within him since the first day he arrived, but I can say for sure that it wasn't operational. The system voiced out in Gustav's mind. It wasn't operational means he has been himself all this time, but he only started changing about 3 months back. There's a chance that this has to do with that change. Now that there is interference from Vera, he should currently be himself. I will need to observe him for now to see how he acts, Gustav said internally. What are you talking about? A man in a large underground laboratory dressed in a blue business suit voiced. The man in front of him wore a lab coat and had a one-lens spectacle on his right eye. The nanites seemed to have met with some kind of resistance. I apologize, Sir Young, but we don't know the reason for this, the man voiced out as he kept tapping on the holographic keyboard in front of him with a frustrated look. Why are you all so incompetent? You had better make sure the nanites are functioning properly again. Indrik must accept the challenge, young Joe voiced out with a tone full of killing intent. The man in the lab coat subconsciously shivered as he answered, Yes, sir. I and the team will do our best to make sure the nanites function as intended. Young Joe scoffed and turned around to leave along with the 2 large men in all-black bodysuits standing beside him initially. Bunch of useless, he voiced out as he moved away. The other scientists within the laboratory had fear-stricken faces as they started working on making sure the nanites within Indrik's body functioned properly. A few hours back, Hung Jo had received a report from one of the officers within camp about how Indrik openly refused to accept Gustav's deathmatch challenge. This report threw Hung Jo off because this was totally the opposite of what he had expected. He started wondering what was wrong with Indrik. Even though he got the report about how Gustav was currently the strongest first-year cadet a week ago, he still had ways to make Indrik win. He would have thought Indrik was afraid of battling Gustav, but then he remembered he had sent a message to Indrik telling him he would be provided with whatever equipment he needed to win, even though the piece of equipment was too powerful to be used against the first year. Young Joe couldn't understand why Indrik would decide to refuse when he knew he had a strong backing such as his. This was something he wouldn't be able to figure out since he didn't get feedback from the text messages he sent Indrik. According to the terms of the deal, he couldn't control Indrik by using the nanites unless he refused to obey his instructions after his training within the MBO. However, young Joe kept getting a bad feeling about Gustav and was concerned about the speed of his growth and the threat he could pose if he was allowed to continue growing. So young Joe decided to breach the contract. He didn't really care about that anyway. He instructed his scientists to control Indrik and make him accept the death battle with Gustav. The scene that had just played out a few minutes ago was due to the scientists mentioning an issue concerning the nanites not functioning properly within Indrik. They tried doing as young Joe had instructed, but they were also met with an interference just like Vera. This was because both parties were interfering with themselves, causing Indrik to currently be free. Every action he was making right now was of his own free will due to the 2 foreign elements within his body being unable to battle the other to supremacy. The next day arrived in a flash, and on this day, Officer Mag decided to pay Gustav a visit. To what do I owe this unexpected breach of privacy? Gustav voiced out as Officer Mag made herself comfortable in his living room. Breach of privacy? I knocked. Officer Mag responded with a scoff. Yeah, you did, and then opened the door with your senior officer's pass right after. Gustav's eyebrows raised up slightly as he voiced out. You didn't respond. Who knows, you could have been drowning or dying in one way or the other inside here. I made the necessary call to prevent accidents. Officer Mag folded her arms as she spoke with a righteous tone. Chapter 493. You're so shameless. You remind me of her. Gustav shook his head as he moved forward to sit down as well. Officer Mag exclaimed. Why are you here? Gustav asked with a straight face. Officer Mag sat up at this point and gazed at Gustav for a few before speaking. I heard about the death match, she stated. So? Gustav asked with a tone of confusion. So did you speak to your bro? I mean Indrik first? Officer Mag asked. Why should I? We have nothing to say to each other. Gustav responded. He does have something to say to you. Don't tell me you didn't notice that he's somewhat different from before, Officer Mag said with a mysterious tone. Not you too. As an instructor, I am disappointed you didn't notice that it was all just an act, Gustav voiced out while rolling his eyes. What? An act? Haha. Officer Mag started laughing out loud after hearing Gustav's statement. I've tortured, broken, and trained that kid every day for the past 3 months. I've spent so much time with him that I can guarantee that I know him better than you do, even though you both lived in the same house for several years, Officer Mag stated. It is not an act. That kid is truly trying his best to be a better person than he used to, she added. Yeah, right. Of course you have no idea about anything. Don't worry, you'll find out in due time, Gustav voiced out cryptically. Listen to me, kid. I ain't no fool, don't discredit me like that. Give your brother a chance, just let him speak to you once, Officer Mag voiced out with a strong tone before standing up and turning around to leave. When she got to the door, she paused for a bit. I'm not disputing the fact that you went through a lot of pain and he was a factor. He played a part in that, but do not forget that he is 12 and half his childhood and upbringing was under your crazy birth mother. Kids have no idea of how to act properly without the right guidance. Remember this, Officer Mag stated before leaving through the door. Gustav sat in place for a few minutes with an expression of contemplation. I guess we shall see, Gustav muttered with a mysterious tone. There were still 3 weeks left till he went for his next mission, so Gustav decided to spend the next week observing Indrik. Day by day, he would either spy on Indrik by activating life signs so he could check his activities through his point of view, or he would stalk him. Gustav still had several skills in his arsenal that he could use to disguise himself, so it was practically impossible for him to be exposed. Gustav noticed that during all his spying, Indrik mostly kept himself in isolation doing self-training in his free time, while sometimes he would go visit Officer Mag. Even though his punishment had ended, Officer Mag would still train him occasionally. There were times he noticed Indrik just staring into space. Gustav could tell that the kid was thinking, which surprised him a bit. Other times Indrik would be laughed at by groups of cadets who saw him as a wimp for backing out of the challenge with Gustav. They would make sure their conversations were loud enough to hear as they ridiculed and laughed at him. Originally, Indrik would be pissed at such actions. However, this time he totally ignored such voices in the background and continued his journey. The entire week went by, and Gustav was not able to find any issue to foul Indrik with. As another day by, Gustav finally decided that he would have that talk with Indrik the next day. By nightfall, Indrik arrived in his room, and just as he took his seat, he heard a knock at the door. He walked towards it and opened it up, only to find a box sitting on the floor in front of his entrance. He picked it up, already knowing who it was coming from. Indrik placed it on the table in the middle of the living room and opened it up. Inside was a small holographic message device. Indrik activated it, and a pre-recorded message was projected in front of him. Hello, Indrik. Young Joss' face and half of his body was being displayed as he talked. I'm sure you must have received several of my previous messages, which means you know what I have instructed you to do but still refuse to do so. That's because I don't have to, you bastard, Indrik said internally. I know that right now you're probably saying something along the lines of, you don't have to obey me now since your training within the MBO hasn't ended, blah blah. Ha ha ha. Indrik's face froze as he heard that. I don't even know how you did it. I'm still wondering how you were able to interfere with the functionality of the nanites. Huh. Interfere with the functionality of the nanites? Indrik had a confused expression on his face as he heard that. It was a good trick, but did you really think I'd let you disobey me? As young Joe got to this point, the footage suddenly changed. Indrik's eyes widened as he saw the next footage. Mom, Dad. Indrik shouted out as he spotted the 2 figures hanging from a rope. Liam and Becky Oslov were tied to each other, hanging upside down within a dimly lit and enclosed space. There were several men in masks seen standing around them with weapons in their grasps. Both parents had blood-soaked faces, and blood was currently dripping down from them and falling to the floor as they were suspended in an upside-down position. The footage glitched and returned back to showing just young Joe. I don't know if this is enough encouragement for you, but I'll add a few more to it. Young Joe started speaking again. Chapter 494. These men, after beating up both your parents half dead, will also rape your mother 37 times each. After taking those turns, they will gut them both and watch them bleed out. Oh, and mind you, all these will be recorded and sent to you. I hope you enjoy watching gory movies. After saying this, young Joe disappeared as the holographic footage turned dark. At this point, Indrik was seething with so much rage that the room walls began to vibrate. The objects in the room all started floating upwards along with his bed. Young Joe, he'll kill you. Indrik voiced out with a voice full of killing intent as his eyes turned completely blue. As Indrik started to get consumed by rage, the footage suddenly came back up. Of course, all these can be prevented if you accept Gustav's death challenge. If you're scared of losing, I will provide you with the best cheat mechanism which will ensure you kill Gustav once and for all. After saying this, the footage displayed his parents again from every angle before disappearing. This time the holographic message had ended for real. Indrik's mind was in a state of confusion at the moment. He remembered Officer Mag's words about how his parents were mostly the cause of his bad personality and Gustav's pain. He had come to this realization already, but they are still my parents. I can't let them suffer this fate. The next day arrived, and as usual, the cadets went for their morning routine. Only 2 weeks remained before Gustav left for his first mission at this point, which meant he only had this week and a few days from the next before his death match with Indrik would either be cancelled or held. At this point, even though it was still being gossiped about, everyone already pushed it aside because they knew without Indrik's acceptance, the battle couldn't hold. Gustav had decided that he would have a discussion with Indrik after today's morning routine. He was still finding it hard to believe that Indrik was changing, but he wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt due to what he had seen the past week. After the morning routine ended, Gustav walked over to Indrik as planned. "Let's talk," Gustav demanded while turning around with the intention to head to somewhere private. "There's no need. We have nothing to say to each other," Indrik suddenly voiced out from behind. Gustav's face showed confusion as he turned around. "What do you mean? You said you have something to say to me. I'm giving you the chance to do that now," he added with a strong tone. "Not anymore, I don't." Indrik responded with a strong tone as well. Both of them stared at each other with intensity. At this point, everyone around was focusing on them both once again. Gustav was wondering what Indrik was playing at as he scrutinized him with a suspicious gaze. "I have accepted your challenge. We will have our death battle next week as intended," Indrik stated before turning to the side and walking away. "Are you sure?" Gustav asked, causing him to pause his footsteps. "Isn't this what you wanted? Don't tell me you're chickening out now, Gustav." A sadistic grin appeared on Indrik's face as he turned to the side and spoke. "Looks like you finally decided to drop the act. I guess it was too tiring for a little kid to keep up a facade." Gustav smirked while turning around. "You can count on getting destroyed next week," Indrik voiced out before resuming walking. Gustav totally ignored his last statement and started walking towards his room. Almost fell for it. "At least now I won't feel any form of uncertainty when tearing you to pieces with my own hands," Gustav said internally as he moved towards his room. No one noticed the slight look of pain on Indrik's face as he walked away. The entire issue got blown up again, causing an uproar all across camp. The cadets were all talking about how the number of special class cadets would go down by 1 in a week from now. Most of them wondered what Indrik was smoking for him to challenge Gustav, who was currently number 1 and was being compared to seniors. Angie, who had witnessed what happened, had a look of confusion on her face. She had a chat with Indrik last week, and Indrik told her he had no intentions of accepting the deathmatch challenge. This had made her calm down, but now Indrik was admitting to accepting it and seemed to have so much animosity towards Gustav once again. She decided to go after Indrik to confront him about the decision, but there was literally no way out now that both parties had accepted the challenge. Gustav later got feedback about the challenge from the challenge hall, which confirmed that Indrik had truly accepted. Their deathmatch would be held a week from now. Gustav was not even bothered in the slightest about how the match was going to turn out. He couldn't see any way through which Indrik could defeat him. "Don't be too cocky. You know that kid definitely wouldn't just accept the challenge without having anything up his sleeves. No one just walks to their own death. You better be careful, the system voiced out when Gustav was channeling his bloodline. Sure I will. But no matter what he has up his sleeves, I will end him this time for good. Gustav responded internally with a cold look. After channeling his bloodline for 2 hours, he decided to check his 5 years quest progress. Quests: locate Dimension 6 in Planet Humbad. Duration: 5 years. Time elapsed: 7 months. Progress: 0.12/100%. Become the most powerful mixed blood on Earth. Duration: 5 years. Time elapsed: 7 months. Progress: 9 to 100%. He was sorely focusing on his progress on becoming the most powerful mixed blood on Earth right now. Almost 10% for the past 3 weeks. Just how powerful is that dude? Gustav felt like progress had been really sluggish recently due to this. Chapter 495. Almost 10% for the past 3 weeks? Just how powerful is that dude? Gustav felt like progress had been really sluggish recently due to this. Even though he could still feel the improvement of his strength with every training, achieving 10% had been an impossible task for the last 3 weeks. He closed the system interface and continued on with his training. Days went by, and the tension created by Gustav's and Indrik's incoming battle still hadn't reduced. Instead, the hype increased daily. After hearing about it, Officer Mag had tried speaking to Indrik several times, but he didn't give her a chance. Same as Angie, the both of them could feel like there was something wrong somewhere. Instructors and officers sent by the higher-ups to try and prevent the battle between the two ended up failing as well. The MBO was not willing to lose any of these two because they both had the highest potential among all other first-year cadets. They could more or less already predict the outcome of the battle since Gustav was currently number 1. Indrik was only 12 years old, yet he was among the most powerful special class cadets. By the time he had achieved the same age as the current first years, they could only guess how powerful he would be then. This would only happen if he lived long enough, but right now, it wasn't looking that way. They couldn't really do anything about it since Gustav and Indrik had refused to listen to reason. The only way out now is if both of them passed out in the middle of, and the chances of that situation playing out is less than 10%. During the week, Gustav received a package from the outside world. The officer that brought it to his door had a respectful gaze and bowed slightly when passing it along to him. Gustav slowly opened the box and found a stack of paper prints within. However, there was a letter above the stack of paper prints. The instant Gustav spotted the name on the letter, a broad smile appeared on his face. Miss Amy. Finally, Gustav muttered underneath his breath with a joyful look. He first took the letter out of the box and moved towards one of the sofas to take a seat. Hey kid, I want to ask how you're doing because I already heard of the ruckus you've caused in camp. Good one. Make sure you deal with nuisances mercilessly. I compiled a report from several outer planetary officers about the planet Humbad in the Trixton Galaxy. The delay was due to the situation with the T-67 device. A lot of crazy stuff has happened in the last 6 months, but I won't mention them in this letter. I'm still on the investigation, but there has been a lot of revelations. Red Shadow is working with me for now. You can meet up with him when you're out of camp for your first mission. I rigged your mission, so expect to see me soon. If you have an important message to pass along to me, use the device in the box. Amy. Gustav read the entire message with a smile on his face. The T-67 device. Looks like they're still on that case, and she rigged my first mission? Does this mean I might get sent to deal with the case she's working on? But didn't the inspectors say my first mission is going to be low-ranked? Gustav was still confused about that particular sentence. There was no way the MBO would send a first-year cadet on a mission with pros that were practically dealing with a very difficult mission. Since he couldn't wrap his head around it, Gustav decided not to overthink for now. He stood back up and moved towards the box to take out the stacks of paper prints. There were at least 300 papers stacked upon each other in 2 places. Gustav brought them both out and stared at the bottom of the box, which was almost empty. A small square-shaped blue device could be seen at the corner of the bottom. This was the same device Miss Amy was referring to that Gustav could use in sending a message to her. Gustav could immediately tell that this device was powerful enough to send a message that would be transmitted outside of camp. He turned around to move back to the seating area in a bid to ignore the device. But he suddenly stopped as a thought appeared in his mind. Gustav turned around again and reached out to grab the device from the box. He immediately tapped the activation button afterward and started speaking. "Miss Amy?" 1 week later, just like that, a week went by, and the day for Gustav's and Indrik's deathmatch finally arrived. Their battle had been scheduled to hold at 12 p.m., so there would still be normal training activities. The entire camp was in an uproar because this was a battle they couldn't miss. However, the Hall of Doom was a place that couldn't accommodate everyone, so only those who arrived early would be able to witness the battle on a closer scale. The training sessions went by in a flash, like time was moving 2 times quicker today. Gustav was accompanied by Eldris, and the rest when it was close to 12 p.m. Just opened a vortex up for them, and they instantly arrived in front of the Hall of Doom. The Hall of Doom was located in a secluded part of the MBO camp where only snowy lands could be seen. It was an ice-cold region with lots of snowy mountains and white trees. The Hall of Doom just happened to be located at the top of a massive glacier. It looked like a tower with the way it extended upwards. Many cadets were trooping towards the location, and some had already arrived inside. The entrance was currently crowded, but the instant Gustav was spotted, the crowd made way for him. Chapter 496. He's here. Oh, my goodness, he looks as dreamy as ever. See those eyes. I can't believe he will be brutally murdering his little brother today. All kinds of discussion could be heard from the background as Gustav walked in. Gustav arrived inside the hall and instantly felt warmth envelop his being. Although the outside of the hall was extremely cold, there was a massive ring of fire within. The inside of the hall looked similar to a rocky cave. The walls and the ground were all ashy in color and rough in a rocky way. There were pathways on the side that formed a kind of circle. The circular pathways that extended around the internal structure of the hall were not very big and had ledges. In the middle was a massive pit of fire and lava that kept combusting. Occasionally pillars of fire would burst out from the pit in the middle. It was up to 100 feet deep, and everyone could see the hot red sea of fire from their positions. In the middle of the river of flames was a battle platform floating on top of it. Everyone would have to watch from the circular pathways that surrounded the pit of fire, and since the pathways weren't very big, not too many people could fit in here. This was where the heat was coming from. It was quite amazing that there was a river of fire within a pit in this cold region. No one understood how the Hall of Doom was constructed. The battle platform in the middle covered a radius of over 5,000 feet, but the river of fire surrounding it was way larger. Gustav arrived at one of the ledges and stared at the platform floating from place to place across the hot, flamey river. Everyone around kept focusing on him. The flaming lava river was extremely hot and would burn anything or anyone caught within in a matter of seconds. The platform was also floating, so the battle was looking more dangerous than ever. However, Gustav already knew this. He leaped from his standing position towards the platform beneath. His body traveled downwards across the river of flames before landing directly on the floating platform. Part of the liquid flames jumped up due to the impact, but the floating platform only moved to the side a bit. Gustav controlled his landing properly, so it wouldn't really cause any effect. He stood in place, waiting for Indrik to show up. It was almost 12 p.m. at this point. Several instructors could be seen in the vicinity. They had to be here to spectate as expected. The instant it was 12 noon, Indrik arrived within the hall. I thought he wasn't going to show up. This kid really signed his death warrant. Who knows, he might put up a good fight. Remember, he still has an unknown bloodline grade. He might be S rank and the terrain is also to his advantage. Indrik also disregarded the discussions in the background like Gustav and leaped downwards the moment he arrived at one of the ledges. His body traveled towards the battle platform, and when he arrived above it, his body slowly descended as he activated his telekinesis. Indrik smoothly landed on the platform and stared forward at Gustav, who was more than 200 feet away from his position. Both parties have consented to this battle. There are no restrictions, no form of punishment shall be meted out for usage of styles, weapons, or gadgetry. One of the instructors voiced out from above. The battle ends when one of the two parties has lost their lives, or if both parties pass out. The entire vicinity became quiet at this point, as that was mentioned. Angie stood in the midst of glade, and Matilda with a worried expression on her face. She could only hope that things would turn out well. EE and the others also watched from their position, but they didn't look worried in any way. Officer Mag was also present here, but she had a look of helplessness on her face because, at this point, there was no way to help the situation. Gustav and Indrik stared at each other intensely as they prepared to start the battle. Begin. The instant the go-ahead was given, Indrik stretched out both of his hands while activating his bloodline. Free-eye. Chunks of flaming lava wrapped in the power of will were suddenly pulled out of the river of flames surrounding them. Gustav dashed forward at this point as Indrik raised his hand up and flung them down, sending these massive balls of flames hurling towards Gustav's approaching figure. Fly, fly, fly. The temperature surrounding Gustav, which was already very hot, turned even more scorching hot as these balls of flames flew towards him. Sway, swee-eye, swee-eye. Gustav first paused his movement and quickly swerved to the side to dodge the first one. Boom. It made a loud sound of collision as it hit the platform, causing liquid flames to blast across the place. At this point, Gustav was busy dodging the next ones. He jumped to the side and spun in the air as he dodged two flame projectiles heading towards him from separate directions. Jumping in the air, Gustav dodged 3 more and closed in the distance between himself and Indrik by another 100 feet. However, the instant he landed, Indrik seemed to have already predicted his landing spot and sent out a compressed wave of will towards him. Why Hierarchy? Several rocks on the platform blasted apart as this wave crashed forward with immense force, arriving in front of Gustav in an instant. Gustav raised his right hand and placed it in front of him since he was unable to dodge it at point blank. Bang! A loud sound of collision rang out as Gustav was pushed back with his clothes ripping from his body, while cracked lines appeared underneath his feet due to getting shifted backward forcefully. Gustav suddenly smirked as he raised one leg up and forcefully stomped it downwards. The instant this action was made, the compressed waves came to a stop. Gustav raised one of his legs and pushed it in front of the other, forcefully pushing the wave backward, which caused Indrik's eyes to widen slightly in surprise. Chapter 497. Gustav raised one of his legs and pushed it in front of the other, forcefully pushing the wave backward, which caused Indrik's eyes to widen slightly in surprise. Gustav began cutting through the waves with sheer force and arched back his left hand before throwing it forward intensely. Bang! His fist made him cut through the waves of will completely, and he dashed forward while activating dash afterward. Indrik gnashed his teeth and swung his hands diagonally, causing more compressed fiery balls to be sent flying towards Gustav again. Sway, sway, swee-eye. Gustav once again dodged all incoming projectiles, leaping towards the side and upwards to make sure none of them made contact with him. Even while dodging them, due to the immense heat, he could still feel his skin getting cooked. 3 were flying towards him from the sides and up front at the same time. Indrik had timed them so perfectly that dodging was nearly impossible. Phew! The first one arrived in front of him. Gustav leaned backward, causing his back to be only a few inches away from making contact with the battle platform. While the first one was flying over his body due to how low he descended, the other 2 were already close to hitting him from the side. Gravitational displacement has been activated. Both compressed liquid fire projectiles headed towards him from the side suddenly slowed down. He spun his body sideways and slapped his hand on the ground, causing his body to ascend upwards. Fly. He completely spun several times in the air as he flew over the flaming projectile on the left and landed a few 100 feet in front. Sprint has been activated. Gustav instantly closed the gap between Indrik and himself before sending a palm strike towards him as he arrived in front of him. Indrik quickly conjured a wall of will in front of himself to use as a shield. Bang! A loud sound of collision reverberated across the entire place as Gustav's palm made contact with the telekinetic wall, which managed to stop his attack from hitting Indrik. However, even with the wall placed in front of him, Indrik was still blasted backward along with the wall, causing him to slide back by over 100 feet. It didn't get destroyed due to the strength of Indrik's will, but the force of Gustav's palm strike still caused him to be blasted backward along with it. Gustav didn't stop there. He dashed forward once again, throwing out his palm repeatedly. Palm strike has been activated. Palm strike has been activated. Palm strike has been activated. Palm strike multiplied the force of Gustav's palm collision by 6 times, which was why it was so powerful that with every hit, an intense wind would be blasted across the surroundings from the point of impact. Indrik gritted his teeth as he noticed the cracks on his telekinetic wall and raised his hand. Gustav suddenly felt a powerful force descending upon him from above and leaped backward. Bang! A loud sound of collision rang out as the platform vibrated intensely. It swayed from place to place, causing hot liquid fire to be blasted forth from the river around them. The outline of a massive palm appeared where Gustav's initial location had been. It turned out that Indrik had conjured a massive invisible palm and sent it crashing down on Gustav. Gustav, after dodging by jumping back, dashed forward once again with speed. This time, Indrik's eyes emitted a deep blue glow as he squeezed his right hand together, forming a fist, before throwing it forward. Foo! The ground started being blasted apart in a straight line as a massive invisible fist, shaped with Indrik's will, traveled forward. Gustav could sense that it was at least the size of a small plane. Indrik arched his arm backward with full force and threw his fist forward. Bang! Small and big forces collided, but unlike what one would expect, Gustav wasn't blasted backward. Instead, Indrik's will collapsed like a fragile piece. Indrik's eyes widened once again, seeing as Gustav was overpowering his will like it was nothing. Gustav once again dashed forward and arrived in front of Indrik like before. Indrik shifted backward and stretched out his hand to wrap his will around Gustav. "Not this time, kid," Gustav said internally as he began increasing in size. Size manipulation has been activated. Gustav increasing in size made it harder for Indrik to wrap his will around him and also took a long time. Gustav's fist arrived in front of Indrik at this moment, striking him square in the chest. Bang! Indrik's chest caved in as the force of Gustav's punch sent him spiraling across the air. Gustav jumped upwards, traveling towards his spiraling body in midair, and somersaulted forward several times before landing on Indrik's chest. Indrik's spiraling body paused in midair as Gustav's landing on his chest caused him to descend with speed. Bang! Another loud collision rang out as Gustav completely pinned Indrik to the platform while standing on his chest with both legs. They were only a few feet from the ledge of the platform at the moment. "Hiya!" Indrik suddenly screamed out, causing a wave of destructive telekinetic force to blast forth from his being. Gustav made an X sign with his arms as the force knocked him off Indrik, throwing him backward by a few hundred feet. Indrik used that opportunity to quickly jump to his feet and clean the blood oozing from his nose. He was hardly injured due to the protective layer of telekinetic armor he wore all across his body. Maintaining this armor took up energy, but it had protected him from the full force of Gustav's punches, so he knew it was useful. He screamed out again as he stomped his feet on the ground, sending another set of destructive telekinesis waves forward. Gustav, at this time, was already prepared for it, so he leaped over 500 feet towards the side, dodging the wave. "Maybe it's time to get a little more serious," Gustav said internally as he began to transform. "You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.